The Honourable Tunku Zafrul Aziz, Minister of Investment, Trade and Industry of Malaysia, Baroness Jones of Whitchurch, Minister at the Department for Business and Trade and the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, Lord Vasey, Chair of the UK-ASEAN Business Council, Tan Sri Nazir Razak, Chair of the ASEAN Business Advisory Council, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Selamat Datang, very good morning and a very warm welcome to the UK-ASEAN Business Forum 2025. We're very grateful for HSBC's, ACCA and Mott MacDonald's kind sponsorship for this year, and we're really looking forward to an excellent discussion where we're looking at how to grow the UK-ASEAN relationship, the trading relationship, but also taking a deeper dive into the issues of finance, geopolitics, talent mobility, and the global challenges that are facing ASEAN in sustainable energy transition and artificial intelligence. And on top of that, we have a great opportunity for you all to get to know each other, to network. ASEAN is all about relationships, all about getting to know each other and making sure that we're all friends, all trying to achieve the same goal together. But it's now my pleasure to invite to the stage someone who truly understands the importance of relationships and of ASEAN, and most importantly, our host for this morning. Stuart Tate, Head of Commercial Banking UK HSBC and Vice Chair of the UK-ASEAN Business Council, to give the introduction. Stuart, please come on up. Please give him a warm welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's a full room. That's wonderful to see, and you've got the sun streaming through for our visitors from Malaysia. So, good morning. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us here today, making the trip to Canary Wharf and to our global headquarters. It's a real honor to give you a warm welcome as an executive of HSBC, but also, as Alan said, the Vice Chair of the UK-ASEAN Business Council. I think that with all the recent positive developments between our two regions, this is genuinely one of the most exciting periods for us to do business together, for us to grow, for us to take advantage of the opportunities, and to see how we can boost growth, which is something that we're all pursuing. Now, 2025 is the year of Malaysia's chairmanship of ASEAN, as you'll know. So I'm particularly pleased to welcome the Honourable Tengku Zafrul this morning, and the Minister of Investment, Trade and Industry of Malaysia, as well as Tan Sri Nazir Razak, the Chairman of ASEAN BAC Malaysia, to today's forum. We look forward to hearing from you. I'm also pleased to welcome the Lord Mayor, a number of ambassadors and high commissions from around the region, as well as His Majesty's Trade Commissioner for Asia Pacific. Now, all of us here today know that trade is absolutely vital to prosperity and growth, and it's central to the UK government's industrial strategy. International trade is also at the core of what we do at HSBC. It's really what we're known for. We were founded to bring together Eastern and Western markets, and our purpose has remained the same for the past 160 years, and that is to connect customers to opportunities no matter where they are. And like many of us, we're proud to work with ambitious businesses, whether they're just starting out in the world of international trade or whether they're experienced exporters delivering to various markets across the world. In November last year, we published our Going Global for Growth. It was a report that we put together after speaking with about 1,500 businesses about their approaches to international trade and expansion. It's one thing to hear what an economist thinks, what a banker thinks, but nothing really beats what 1,500 businesses think. And not surprisingly, most UK businesses look to Europe and the US when they start trading internationally. It's typically the more experienced businesses that look to the exciting markets in Asia. But we all know that some of the most promising opportunities are in the ASEAN region. And with the right support, businesses of all sizes and all experience can prosper in the ASEAN region. And ASEAN isn't just one of the world's fastest growing regions. It has a range of opportunities, a real range of opportunities as diverse as the economic profiles of its various member states. And what strikes me is that the region is really innovating at speed. That's a real standout, and the region is committed to developing the digital economy. That was evidenced by the negotiation of the world's first regional digital trade agreement, the ASEAN Digital Economy Framework Agreement. Now, the UK and ASEAN are natural partners. We have a long history together, and in 2021, the UK became the first new dialogue partner to ASEAN in 25 years, and that formalized relationships with the group. And it presents a real opportunity to deepen our partnership, and I'm sure that'll be much of today's discussion. And the UK's official accession to CPTPP in December last year is another significant milestone for UK-ASEAN trade. That's going to help UK enhance trading links with the Asia-Pacific region and strengthen ties with some of the world's most exciting growth markets, whether it's startups, innovation, and technology more generally. Now, HSBC's got a significant part to play in helping those businesses maximize the opportunities that are out there. We've been doing business in ASEAN for 130 years, most of our history, and like you, we're excited about the potential for future growth between the two regions. In 2023, I don't have the 2024 numbers, but in 2023, total trade between the UK and ASEAN was £47 billion. UK exports to the region were up 5% in something that was far from a favorable trading environment, and UK FDI into the region reached $2.2 billion. So in summary, there's significant opportunities ahead. We feel we can build much more on this going forward, and at HSBC, we're really delighted to be playing our small part in helping businesses to make that happen. So it's great to gather, to convene. Please enjoy the day, enjoy the discussions in this room, but also out in the lobby area. Hope you have great dialogue. There's insight that you can use to grow your business, run your organization, and thank you again for coming to see us in our main office. Thank you.
Very much, Stuart. It's now my pleasure to invite our passionate advocate who is always championing UK-ASEAN trade, Ian Gibbons, the CEO of the UK-ASEAN Business Council. Please give him a warm welcome.
Thank you, Alan, for a passionate introduction for this morning. Unsurprisingly, I'm genuinely excited and pleased to welcome everyone to this year's 2025 UK-ABC Annual Business Forum. And I'm especially pleased to welcome Baroness Jones, the Minister for Science, Technology and Innovation, Minister Tengku Zafrul Aziz, Malaysia's Minister of Trade for Investment, and of course Tan Sri Nazir Razak, the Chair of the ASEAN Business Advisory Council and who is leading the Malaysian business delegation. I'd also like to welcome our very good friend and strong supporter, Martin Kent, His Majesty's Trade Commissioner based in Singapore, but covering that small patch of Asia Pacific. Welcome, Martin. Now, I've been around long enough to know one never takes things for granted, but I'm fully expecting today's forum to be even better than in previous years. We're expecting over, and I think we've got over 100 participants, probably our record, at a forum. And I always exaggerate, but I'm not exaggerating this time. We've got 400 people on a live stream from the UK, Southeast Asia, and across the world. But before going any further, I would like to say a huge thank you to my team, to Ben, to Alan, to Ken and Clarissa, for the incredibly draining on occasions, hard work putting this together, but they've loved every minute of it, so that's fantastic. Now, I think you recall people, Michael Jordan, a world-famous basketball NBA legend, used to say that the harder he practiced, the luckier he got. And there's adages from golfers as well. But if you think about that phrase, it really makes a lot of sense. So that applies to the forum, and we haven't taken anything for granted. But in addition to my team, I do want to say a huge thank you to Stuart and his team, who have worked seamlessly with the UKABC team. So Karen, Michael, and Bella, thank you very much indeed. Also, thank you to our two private sector partners, in addition to HSBC, ACCA, and Mott MacDonald. Thank you very much. Their input and drive from our business members is essential to gain traction in the region. We couldn't do it without them, just as we couldn't do it without the colleagues from the Department for Business and Trade and the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. It makes it a truly joined up team effort to deliver what matters for Southeast Asia. For those who I've not previously come into contact with, which prompts me why you're here, frankly, how did you get in? UKABC is an independent partner to UK government and the private sector. We facilitate dialogue between policy and shared global challenges, ultimately about facilitating two-way global trade. And I've deliberately quoted our headline message because it's important, and I make no apology for doing so. We're proud of who we are, what we do, and on behalf of the private sector members and our partnership with His Majesty's Government, we've worked really hard to be that highly thought of private sector organisation. Thank you for giving up your time. Enjoy today, and I hope everything goes well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ian. The UK government has been working at pace and with great determination since the UK became a dialogue partner in 2021, when Brunei was chair of ASEAN. UKABC truly values the important relationship we have with the UK government, and we're very grateful that Baroness Jones of Whitchurch, the Minister at the Department for Business and Trade, and the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, and whose portfolio includes the future digital economy and online safety, is with us today. Would you please give a very warm UKABC welcome to Baroness Jones.
Thank you so much for such a warm welcome today, and it's an absolute pleasure to speak at today's UK-ASEAN Business Forum in front of a great audience of UK and international businesses. I'd first like to thank HSBC for hosting us in your wonderful headquarters here in Canary Wharf, and I'd like to thank UKABC and its chair, Lord Vasey, for the very warm welcome and for organising this event. Thank you also to Your Excellency Minister Zafrul, representing Malaysia as Chair of ASEAN, and to Tan Sri Nazar Razak from the ASEAN Business Advisory Council for making this journey to London. It's great to see you all here today. Given my brief as Minister responsible for technology policy, I'm of course fascinated by Southeast Asia as an emerging technical superpower. A region with the fastest growing internet market in the world, 125,000 new users coming onto the internet every day, and from where more than 50 unicorns have emerged to date. A region where there is already a strong public-private partnership in emerging tech and digital infrastructure. There's no better example of this than the recent large investment by the Malaysian government into Arm Holdings as a key strategic AI technology partner, a first major step towards a world-leading AI chip ecosystem to deliver on Malaysia's Silicon vision. In fintech, we're seeing similar amazing growth opportunities in payment systems, open banking, and digitalization of finance. As the sector grows, the complexities and the opportunities grow too, and working together towards common goals is the best path to progress. It's also been very encouraging hearing about HSBC's work, along with many other partners, with the Monetary Authority of Singapore to cultivate the best conditions for innovation. We in the UK are dedicated to working together with our partners across the globe to realise our digital and tech ambitions. By sharing expertise and driving innovation, together we can shape global standards, boost our economies, and create opportunities for all. And frankly, in this increasingly uncertain world, the UK government's commitment to a strong and ambitious ASEAN-UK relationship is both a geopolitical and economic priority. Although the UK has only been a dialogue partner for just over 3 years, we see the partnership as one that's offering significant opportunities for both the UK and ASEAN and its member states. I'm really proud to say that we have delivered around 80% of the 180 commitments in our plan of action with ASEAN, which tells you a lot about how hard the UK and our partners in ASEAN are working to establish that new relationship. A growing ASEAN-UK partnership will help ASEAN build resilient, thriving economies while maintaining a peaceful, prosperous region for business and people. The Prime Minister here in the UK has been clear about the 5 missions he has for the UK government, and top of that list has to be economic growth. In the coming months, you will see these growth policies clearly set out with the publication of our industrial and trade strategies. Growth is a goal I know that ASEAN shares, and a goal that we can only achieve by strengthening our international partnership and working together. Therefore, we look forward to building on those solid foundations of the economic and trade cooperation which we have started, in particular through our Economic Integration Programme launched last April. This is a £25 million programme focused on 3 main pillars: open trade, including digital, financial services, and regulatory reform. That's a starting point, not an exhaustive list, and we're following with interest the negotiations on the Digital Economy Framework Agreement and supporting ASEAN's strategic plans for supply chain resilience. The next 2 years will see the direction for our partnership. This year, under Malaysia's chairmanship, we're looking forward to exploring where we can work together on everything from semiconductor supply chains to energy cooperation. In particular, we welcome Malaysia's goal to substantially conclude ASEAN's Digital Economy Framework Agreement negotiations this year. So I look forward to listening to His Excellency, the Minister, to understand how the UK can best support Malaysia in this and in other goals. 2026 will be another important year for the UK-ASEAN partnership as we mark the 5-year anniversary of our digital partnership and launch our second plan for action. We expect this to cement our burgeoning relationship further, focusing on areas where the UK can make the most impact that benefits both sides. And finally, it's great to see the huge turnout from UK businesses today here, both in this room and to the hundreds joining online. I want to see you making the most of trading and operating in this region, which offers so much. DBT, both directly and through our partners at UKABC, is looking forward to hearing from businesses about what they think of the opportunities as we draw closer together with our partners in the region. This is not only through ASEAN, but also through the opportunities that the UK is unlocking through large-scale trade agreements like CPTPP, and more bespoke bilateral agreements like our new partnerships with Thailand and Indonesia. These agreements will help you and the UK more widely to enhance and expand our presence in the region to mutual benefit. We know that to maximise the potential, we need to ensure business insight is at the heart of our decision-making, and we will make that a reality. So I look forward to seeing what UK businesses can accomplish in ASEAN in the future, and what the UK and ASEAN can do together to build a lasting partnership which will enhance prosperity for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Baroness Jones. It's now a real pleasure of mine to invite our next speaker to the podium. He has a long and distinguished career in the world of finance. He's strong connections with the UK, including being a Chevening Fellow, and sits on the International Advisory Board of the Oxford Blavatnik School of Government. A business leader in ASEAN, a gentleman and a scholar. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a very warm welcome to Tan Sri Nazir Razak, Chair of the ASEAN Business Advisory Council.
Thank you, Alan, for that nice introduction and for whispering to me, please give your 5-minute remark in 3 minutes. Honourable Minister, Lord Vasey, Baroness, Ian, ladies and gentlemen, firstly, thank you for having me here today, and thank you on behalf of the Malaysian delegation, and thank you, Stuart, for hosting us here today, and also the other sponsors, ACCA and Mott MacDonald. As you know, the ASEAN BAC is the private sector body that interfaces with governments on behalf of the business community right across ASEAN. And this year, our chairmanship year, we intend to make a significant difference in terms of the economic integration of ASEAN. ASEAN BAC has quite an aggressive agenda, 12 priority projects for 2025. I won't go into them today because I'll upset Alan, sorry. But just to highlight the important ones, Viz Financial Services, we're looking to launch the ASEAN IPO prospectus this year. We're looking to advise governments how to enable more capital in the private market sphere. We're looking to increase trade by enhancing digitalization of trade across the region. We have projects on sustainability, on AI, etc. The important thing is that when we come to the UK and our other dialogue partners, we meet business people and discuss how we can collaborate. And I'm actually very enthusiastic after yesterday and hopefully even more so after today, because just by meeting, we came up with ideas on how we can work together. Yesterday in the talent mobility sphere, in the AI sphere, and others. We have new ideas just because we came to the UK, and I think that's very important. And as you know, some of you know, this is our first visit outside ASEAN, and that's because we have this close connection with the UK, not because we had 2 good football games to watch over the weekend. But ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot to talk about today, so I won't belabor my speech. I'd just like to end by saying this, that I have been in the ASEAN game for a very long time, since 2007. And to be honest, after the first 8 years or so, I was quite jaded because, you know, I thought ASEAN was moving too slowly. ASEAN was frustrating in its bureaucracy. But now, when I reflect on that, I think the ASEAN has its way of getting things done. And secondly, I think that I'm optimistic about ASEAN again. Why? For 3 reasons. Firstly, if you look at the way the world is evolving, I think ASEAN strategic neutrality will mean that it's well positioned for FDI from everywhere. And secondly, that the ASEAN governments realize that it's very important to do more amongst ourselves, so we must integrate better. The second reason is, if you look at ASEAN, I've never seen a convergence of internationalist leaders all at the same time, from Anwar Ibrahim to Prabowo in Indonesia and so on. We really have a group of internationalist leaders who are very pro-regionalism. And the final point I'd like to make is that after many years of trying to implement the ASEAN Economic Community, I think ASEAN has learned the right lessons in terms of what it can do, what it cannot do, what it should do, what it shouldn't do. And so we're not going to be overly ambitious, but we're going to make progress. We're going to get things done. We're going to do more business within ourselves. And I think we're also going to do more business with the rest of the world, starting hopefully with the UK. Thank you again, and have a good conference today.
Thank you very much, Tan Sri. As Tanjri mentioned, Prime Minister Anwar was here in January together with Minister Tunku Zafrul. And when they came, my heart sank a little bit because I thought, surely he's not going to want to come back again to London so soon afterwards. But as a testament to his personal and to Malaysia's strong commitment to the UK-ASEAN relationship, he's back not just for the football, but also for the UK-ASEAN Business Forum. And chairing this session is our very own chair, who is equally passionate about all things ASEAN and will be leading what I'm sure will be a witty, intellectual and business-useful conversation on how we can grow together with ASEAN. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a very warm welcome to the Honourable Tunku Zafrul Aziz, Minister of Investment, Trade and Industry of Malaysia, and the Right Honourable Lord Vaisi of Didcot, Chair of the UK-ASEAN Business Council.
Minister Zafrul, welcome. Thanks for the acoustics in this room. I'm going to welcome you in triplicate and make my speech in triplicate, make sure we get to the right, to the left and the middle. But I just want to echo what Alan Lay said. It's wonderful to have you back here. You came over with the Prime Minister 2 months ago. We had a fantastic round table with your Prime Minister, who I thought was really incredibly engaging. He's got a fantastic dry sense of humour, but rarely in a politician as well, he answered all the questions that were asked of him and thought about what he was going to say and gave a proper answer. So it's fantastic. But it's brilliant to have you here as well, because we had dinner last night. We had a really thoughtful discussion about the links between Malaysia and the UK, but also obviously the direction of travel of ASEAN and your ambition as a senior minister, as part of the chairmanship of ASEAN, your ambitions for the year of Malaysia's chairmanship. And as I'm sure a lot of people in this room know, you're an incredibly experienced banker. You've come, as it were, late to politics after a successful business career. So you bring both those perspectives to bear. So we're very much looking forward to hearing your remarks, and then we'll give you a sort of grilling, a sort of political style TV grilling after your remarks. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Was that an invite? Or?
Yes, we've got a microphone on as well.
Yes. So thank you. First of all, Baroness Jones, thank you for attending as well, and Lord Vaisi, thank you for the kind introduction. There's also the chair of UKABC, Stuart, Ian as well, and of course Tan Sri Nazir, and the rest of you here, the sponsors from ACCA, as well as Mark O'Donnell, yes, sorry. And all the captains of industries from, I can see from ASEAN, especially from Malaysia, as well as the United Kingdom. So good morning. It's really a privilege to be here today among esteemed leaders of the UKABC, a lot of familiar faces, and also distinguished guests, industry captains from both the UK and ASEAN. I would like to extend my gratitude to UKABC for this opportunity to address the audience this morning, and as well for those who are online this morning. And the theme of today's forum, if you're not aware, is Growing Together, Connecting a Sustainable Digital and Shared Future. So this resonates deeply with Malaysia's vision for ASEAN for 2020-2025, which is inclusivity and sustainability. So I look forward to sharing Malaysia's aspirations as we take on this important role. So before I get grilled, I have a few things I would like to share with you. So just over a week ago, I shared the 31st ASEAN Economic Ministers Retreat. It was in Johor, in Malaysia, where we had in-depth discussions on ASEAN challenges, our key milestones, and we talk about deeper economic integration. A central concern among my colleagues, among the other ministers, was the evolving geopolitical landscape and the possible impact on regional economic growth. So as a trading bloc, ASEAN is deeply interconnected, and not only with the region, but also through global trade, global markets through trade. We have talked, a few of you mentioned about FDIs, the supply chain. And ASEAN's total trade reached $3.5 trillion US dollars. We have a surplus of close to $100 billion, which is up 24% compared to the year before. And intra-trade ASEAN is around 22%, and the rest of it, close to, well, obviously 78%, was with external partners, and that's around 35, including 35 billion US dollars in trade with the UK. So from that numbers, you can see, given our reliance on international trade, any global disruptions will directly impact ASEAN's economic stability. So amid growing trade tensions, geopolitical shifts, as well as rising protectionism, ASEAN, we want to continue to remain agile, proactive, and strategic in navigating these challenges. Just now, Tan Sri Nazir mentioned about being strategically neutral, right? And at that retreat, we reaffirmed our commitment to regional economic integration, and then we charted a path for ASEAN to become the world's fourth largest economic bloc by the year 2030. Today, we are the fifth largest economic bloc. This requires leveraging emerging trends in the digital economy, in the green economy, in science, technology, and innovation, and expanding partnerships with new and emerging markets to diversify ASEAN's role in the global supply chain. So, ladies and gentlemen, as ASEAN Chair 2025, we have the privilege, Malaysia as Chair had the privilege of setting the priority economic deliverables, or we call it the PEDs. These are the key economic initiatives that drive ASEAN's growth. And for 2025, we have curated PEDs that will deepen economic integration, will enhance trade and investment, drive inclusive growth, as well as advance sustainability, and includes, as mentioned just now on DEFA, accelerate digital transformation. So these priorities reflect our vision to be a more resilient and future-ready ASEAN. So Malaysia's priority economic deliverables will be important, in fact, will be pivotal for our ASEAN Chairmanship, marking the key milestones in the region for the year 2025. A major achievement will be the ASEAN Trade in Goods Agreement, an upgrade to the current ATIGA, which will enhance regional trade and economic connectivity. And Malaysia's PEDs, one of them, will focus on strengthening economic integration and supply chain resilience by fostering cross-border cooperation in high-impact industries like semiconductor, renewable energy, as well as tourism. So strengthening supply chain linkages in these sectors will help mitigate risks from global disruptions while reinforcing ASEAN's position as an innovation-driven economic hub. And there is a vast potential for UK industries to explore ASEAN's end-to-end supply chain capabilities. And then where gap exists, I think UK businesses can play a role in developing and operating those critical areas. Another key PED is accelerating ASEAN's transition to the green economy. This is through sustainable investment frameworks. We have the EV adoption and climate resilient finance mechanisms. So while ASEAN member states maybe vary in economic maturity, the region is committed to balancing the growth with sustainability. So this year, Malaysia will champion initiatives like the ASEAN Sustainable Investment Guidelines, we call it the ASIG, and the ASEAN Centre of Excellence for MSMEs in green transition to establish regional best practices. I think the UK, as you know, is a leader in financial services innovation and green finance regulation, with institutions like the UK Centre for Greening in Finance and Investment, and as well as the UK Climate Investments, setting global benchmarks. So ASEAN can leverage UK expertise to accelerate its green finance strategies and integrate sustainability into economic planning. So ladies and gentlemen, digital transformation is a top priority for Malaysia's ASEAN Chairmanship. And our PEDs include initiatives to advance e-commerce, fintech, AI, and cybersecurity, ensuring that the benefits of the digital economy are inclusive across ASEAN. A landmark achievement in 2025 will be the Digital Economic Framework Agreement. Hopefully we can conclude that by November. the plan is under the DEFA, it will harmonize regulations, standards, and practices to facilitate cross-border digital trade and data flows, with the potential to double ASEAN's digital economy to $2 trillion by the year 2030. And DEFA has drawn interest from UK tech companies and global players. Capacity building in digital governance and standards remains a key challenge, and we welcome the UK's collaboration and expertise. I understand that UKABC has been engaging with the ASEAN Secretariat and DEFA negotiating committee. Therefore, we look forward to strengthening our partnership. This is obviously for mutual benefit. Ladies and gentlemen, one other point I would like to share is that the initiatives under Malaysia's ASEAN Chairmanship are not entirely new ambitions, but rather a continuation of the ASEAN Economic Community, or AEC, Blueprint 2025. This was first adopted during Malaysia's chairmanship in 2015. And over the last 10 years, this blueprint has driven ASEAN's regional economic integration, and our focus in 2025 is to amplify its efforts while aligning to emerging economic trends and high growth sectors. The ASEAN Economic Community Blueprint has already delivered significant benefits, including, firstly, trade liberalization, with the elimination of ASEAN tariffs and stronger trade with ASEAN's dialogue partners. Of course, UK is one of them. And the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP, stands as a key achievement. This will enhance ASEAN's integration and with all the 5 major trading partners. Secondly, services sector liberalization, creating new opportunities in finance, logistics, and professional services. Thirdly, advancing the digital economy. This is again what I talked about on DEFA, strengthening digital connectivity and regulatory harmonization. And lastly, infrastructure and logistics improvements, enhancing regional connectivity and facilitating seamless trade and investment flows. So many of you who have been engaged in ASEAN over the past decade have witnessed firsthand how these developments have transformed the region's economic landscape. And looking beyond 2025, we are finalizing AEC Strategic Plan 2026 to 2030, which will be built on the blueprint's achievements and then guide ASEAN's economic priorities for the next 5 years. The plan is aligned with the ASEAN Community Vision 2045, both of which will be adopted at the 46th ASEAN Summit, and that's 2 months' time in May. The aim is clear: a stronger, a more integrated, and future-ready ASEAN economy. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we conclude, I want to emphasize the importance of continuous engagement between ASEAN and the UK in expanding business opportunities and deepening the strong economic ties we have built, whether through G2G cooperation, government-to-government cooperation, or business-to-business partnership. In fact, last night we talked also about people-to-people partnerships. And ASEAN remains steadfast in its commitment to fostering a business-friendly environment. We want to prioritize certainty, accountability, efficiency, and transparency in our policies and service delivery. I encourage you to engage with us, not just at the levels at leaders and ministerial levels, but also through our ASEAN senior economic officials, and we have the ASEAN Business Advisory Council platform to further strengthen ASEAN-UK trade and investment. So together, let's continue driving shared prosperity and a brighter future for all. So thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you for your keynote address. Very grateful. We're actually going to open this up to the floor. So we would love some questions or indeed comments from the audience on what you've heard from the Minister. But let me just start by asking you about the commitment to free trade, which we heard you talking about earlier. You were at the Economic Ministers' meeting. You were the chair of it, in fact. And one of the things that interests me is obviously we're in a world, as you alluded to, that is heading potentially towards protectionism, but also with ASEAN itself, you have economies developing at different paces. How do you manage the room, as it were, when you're talking about free trade, you're talking to different members with different economic priorities? How embedded is it, as it were, to have as open a marketplace, if you like, within the region?
Yeah. Well, I did mention in my speech that we are in a position to say that we are optimistic that we will conclude the third upgrade of the ASEAN Trade and Goods Agreement. We have seen trade improving within ASEAN member nations, states, but what we have not seen is improvement in areas where SMEs are involved. And that's why we talked about Digital Economic Framework Agreement, where we feel that with DEFA, more companies in Southeast Asia will benefit from trade. Because if you look at the number of companies that are registered, 99% are SMEs and micro SMEs, and they feel excluded, right, in ATIGA. So with DEFA, I think it will be complementing what we already have in ATIGA, and we're already upgrading that as well. We want to make sure that all companies, be it large local companies or multinational companies, especially the SMEs and micro SMEs, benefit from the flow of trade. So that's something that we believe will mitigate some of the concerns of countries that feel they are left out. Their companies are left out. Because if you look at the GDP growth of the region and the population of ASEAN, I mean, for those of you not aware, the GDP of ASEAN today is around $3.8 trillion and growing at 4 to 5%. And the population is 680 million today, and out of which half of that population, or nearly half of that of ASEAN population, is under the age of 30. So the growth prospect is there, and we want to capture that growth, and we want ASEAN member states to take part in the growth.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Who would like to ask or make a comment, a question or a comment? I knew that James Crabtree would want to ask a question. Have we vetted James's question?
Let me ask the obvious question. Could you say a little bit more about how the, given the economic development yesterday, but in general, the turbulence coming out of Washington, could you say a little bit more about how the relationship between ASEAN and the United States looks from your position, both in Malaysia as an economic minister, but also as ASEAN chair?
Are you asking me or are you asking Amir?
He's asking you.
Well, is this recorded?
Yes.
For Malaysia, well, we'll start with Malaysia first, right? So Malaysia obviously have a very strong trade and investment relationship with the US. US continues to be our largest export destination. US first, China second, very close second. And when we talk about FDI, US is still the largest FDI coming into Malaysia. So we do value the trade and investment relationship that we have with the US, right? And we have many US companies in Malaysia and expanding, and new companies as well coming in. And at the same time, for the time being, there's not much announcements regarding Malaysia or ASEAN, although some have told me that it is inevitable, it will come. So what do we do, right? So for Malaysia, what's important is we continue the engagement with the US through Department of Commerce, through USTR, etc., which we continue to do. And also Malaysian companies and US companies based in Malaysia. What are the concerns? The concern is we have a trade surplus with the US, for example. This is a very small trade surplus compared to many other countries. We are not in the top 10, but the concern will be whether we have, are we being used as a destination, as a port by other countries to export goods to the US, cheap goods or subsidized goods. So we are looking at 4 areas to ensure that we continue to engage the US, and this was also discussed. Now I go to the ASEAN side, ASEAN level, where I mentioned in my speech, we had an ASEAN Economic Ministers Retreat. So one of the topics discussed was the US. So we have agreed that all ASEAN member states will form a task force, ASEAN task force, to look at how ASEAN engage US as one voice. As what you alluded to just now, there are many countries within ASEAN who are obviously have different priorities when dealing with the US or dealing with any other country for that matter. So we will need to come up with a common, agreement on common issues that we all can agree to, and then engage the US. And we've agreed to also the same 4 areas that Malaysia is looking at. One is trade, because we shouldn't confine the issue with US just to trade. The other 3, the other one is on supply chain. Hello. Okay. The other one is on supply chain resiliency, because ASEAN continues to play an important role when it comes to supply chain with the US. Malaysia, for example, have a supply chain framework agreement with the US. The other one is talking about the importance of technology safeguards, technology security. I think some of the concerns are around whether technology are being used wrongly by companies or by other actors. And finally, talking about our competitive advantage in some of the agriculture and strategic minerals. So these are areas where we can work together with the US.
Thank you very much. We're well over schedule, but I just wanted to ask a couple of more questions of the Minister before he departs. Since,
are you allowed to?
They're going to be soft, don't worry. I didn't used to work with you. Yeah. So it's not in my DNA to ask you a different question. I was very interested in what you said about digitization, because it seems to me that that is also part of the free trade agenda. The real ambition of Malaysia as chair and ASEAN in particular to break down the digital regulatory barriers. You mentioned specifically, for example, e-commerce. You know, you're sitting in your sitting room in Vietnam buying something from a Malaysian company. Is this a Herculean task, or is there a very clear pathway forward that's going to make a big material difference at the end of your chairmanship?
Is it working? Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm still there are concerns that whether we can conclude the Digital Economic Framework Agreement, because as you have alluded to again just now, about the difficulties of getting all ASEAN member states to agree on some of the terms, because we are trying to harmonize regulations and then the payments as well, the payment gateways, etc. But I'm optimistic we can, and we are also even looking at concluding it by September or October. The numbers are big if we can start by the year 2026, right? We're looking at $2 trillion US dollars of trade using e-commerce by the year 2030. The problem will be to ensure that the physical part as well, the logistics, the customs, etc., also are on board. And this is why I think we need a whole of government approach of each country to participate in this. So I'm optimistic. Many companies are actually looking forward to this, and of course UKABC as well is assisting in many areas. But again, what's important is that all the governments that have agreed to this, I mean ASEAN member states that have agreed to, must push this to ensure that our companies can leverage this as well. My concern is we announced this, but not many participate in this. So we need to educate as well our SMEs to take part in this agreement and leverage the agreement.
Fantastic. And final question. I'd love to get your own personal reflection. You had a hugely successful career in business. You were called in by the government because of your economic and financial expertise. Mm-hmm. So you inadvertently became a politician. How have you found the transition? What have you noticed about the differences or indeed similarities between working in business and working in politics?
Is there time out? No. Do we still have time? Ian? Well, when I joined government in 2010, I was in a bank called CIMB before that. Tan Sri Nazir actually brought me to join the bank. And he was the chairman, supposed to be non-executive, but sometimes executive.
That is brilliant. That's how I'm going to refer to him as from now on.
Yeah, but on a serious note, I served the bank for 5 years, and I've been in the banking industry for 20 plus years. And I thought this is a time when I was offered the role to join the government. I thought this was the time to understand how government works and also to contribute back to the country, right? But of course, that was before COVID. And I didn't know there was going to be COVID. So a month after becoming the finance minister, then we announced that we had to do a lockdown. And that's where, as Minister of Finance at that time, it was a very difficult role to play because now everything falls under the ministry, right? We have to come up with various packages to support the economy, right? I mean, basically all businesses are closed, where people can't go to work, etc., right? So to me, at that time, I continued wanting to support my role as Minister of Finance at that time, but not interested in politics. That was the first 2 years. And then I realized that, look, there are a lot more things that I can contribute and I can play a role in helping the government. But in Malaysia, just like in the UK, you have to have a platform to continue. And that means you have to continue to be a member of parliament, right? And you have to have a party. So that's when I decided to be active in politics. And well, the rest is history. And now from Ministry of Finance, I joined the Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry. It has been a very different experience, but definitely a fulfilling experience so far.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Minister, for coming to join us. It's been a real pleasure hearing from you about your agenda for ASEAN as part of the team chairing ASEAN this year and also your personal reflections. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
A big thank you very much, Lord Vasey. And a big thank you to Minister Tunku Zafrul as well for joining us, and thank you for your constant support and contributions to the UK-ASEAN business relationship. Moving swiftly on to the next session on enhancing financial services in ASEAN, we're delighted to have such another stellar cast of speakers in the panel, including the Lord Mayor of London, who I had the absolute pleasure of showing around Bandar Seri Begawan a few years ago. So invite to the stage Tan Sri Nazir Razak, Chairman of the ASEAN Business Advisory Council, Stephanie Batant, the Managing Director, Head of Global Trade Solutions, UK-HSBC, and Alderman Alistair King, the Lord Mayor of London, who's waiting in the wings, and Tracy Vegro, CEO of the Chartered Institute for Securities and Investment, who will be chairing this session. Ladies and gentlemen, please give them a very warm welcome as they come up to the stage, and I'll hand over to Tracy.
Lovely.
So by introduction, we're already running slightly late, but I'm very, very proud to say that we're going to kick off this session about enhancing financial services in ASEAN by hearing from the current Lord Mayor of London, Alistair King. Thank you.
Thank you. Your Excellency, my Lords, ladies and gentlemen, it's a good morning. It's a great delight to be here today at HSBC's magnificent headquarters for the UK-ASEAN Business Forum. Lovely to see some familiar faces in the room. Thank you very much indeed for the kind invitation to join the discussions here today. It was great to hear from the Minister about plans for financial services, particularly in Malaysia. I am the 696th Lord Mayor of London, and I act as the ambassador for the United Kingdom's financial and professional services industry. And ASEAN is, of course, one of our most important trading partners. My predecessor attended the 56th ASEAN Economic Ministers meeting in Laos in September 24, so it's something that's absolutely key to our agenda. And the City of London Corporation works to secure and enhance London's position as the leading global financial and business centre. including strengthening connections and cooperation with international partners around the world. The role is remarkable. It has many facets to it, but effectively it's trying to raise the horizons of British businesses to go out to the world to do much more than they're currently doing, and that's something I'm really encouraging British businesses to do. The other element is to encourage foreign direct investment into the sectors that I've mentioned. Global this is financial, professional, legal and maritime services. And effectively, the mantra I have is that if you want to insure against catastrophe, do it in London. If you want to raise debt or raise equity, do it in London. If you want to fall out with your partners, sue them in London. It's a very simple proposition. The theme of my mayoralty is growth unleashed, working on regulatory reform, mindset reform, and also technological investment so that financial and professional services can drive economic growth throughout the United Kingdom. As part of our work to update the Mansion House Compact, which is something that another one of my predecessors, Nicholas Lyons, sort of put the ball rolling to allow UK savings and pension funds to allocate more assets to innovative businesses in the field, such as fintech, biotech and life sciences. And across the board, I'm calling for British businesses to invest more in the new technologies, to jump on planes and to bang on doors, seeking out new opportunities, particularly those in ASEAN. And I think with regard to ASEAN, we start from a very strong position. The United Kingdom is ASEAN's third largest trading partner in financial services. Financial services account for almost 16% of British services exports to ASEAN, worth some £1 billion. And we want to see this number grow much further. Indonesia alone is predicted to be one of the world's 7 largest economies by 2030. British financial and professional services sector, with its breadth and expertise, plus also the extraordinary experience that it has and the global connections, we are well placed to build on our cooperation with ASEAN and deliver greater growth. One of the areas I want to particularly concentrate in this speech is fintech. With more than 3,000 fintech companies and one of the most progressive regulatory environments in the world, the United Kingdom is the second largest fintech market by value globally, and certainly one of the most dynamic. ASEAN's digital economy is projected to leapfrog into the world's top 5 by 2025, and it's forecast to grow 6% annually, reaching as high as £2 trillion worth by 2030. ASEAN has more than 400 million digital consumers, a burgeoning tech-savvy population, and an e-commerce sector which is generating more than £99 billion in revenue in 2022. ASEAN is also home to 30 unicorns, many of which have strong connections with the United Kingdom. Considering ASEAN's theme of inclusivity and sustainability under Malaysia's chairmanship, and with plans for an Asian carbon market, the United Kingdom has a very important offer to make and is as a vital hub for green finance throughout the world. The opportunities for growing together and connecting a sustainable and a digital shared future are huge. The number, just for your reference, the number of unicorns here in the United Kingdom is 87. British firms need to look to ASEAN to make sure that they're part of ASEAN's incredible success story. I very much look forward to my visits to Indonesia, to Vietnam, to Singapore and elsewhere in ASEAN later in the year to explore opportunities for further collaboration. And we look forward to welcoming the Deputy Prime Minister of Vietnam to the City of London next week. I'd like to thank the UK-ASEAN Business Council, particularly my friends Lord Vasey and also Alan Lai for their work on this. And it's also, I'd like to just pay tribute to our tireless His Majesty's Trade Commissioner Martin Kent, who does so much to promote the United Kingdom throughout ASEAN. I'm very grateful to you for your hard work. On behalf of the City of London Corporation, we wish you all a very successful forum, and I do look forward to speaking with many of you during the course of the day. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Right. Well, I think you can agree it's a very illustrious panel. And it's almost very difficult to know where to start. But because we haven't heard from you yet, Stephanie, I wondered if you might just want to give us your perspective, a few words.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm very honored to be on this panel. And of course, HSBC is incredibly committed to making the UK-ASEAN relationship build from strength to strength. Before moving to the UK, spent 4 years in Vietnam. My children were born, so I have a personal commitment to making this a success. I think just on the Lord Mayor's comments around green financing and green opportunities, I think it's a fantastic area of collaboration for us. The first, of course, is to, there's a lot of echo. I don't know. The first, of course, is to harmonize the standards and to build a common framework. This is a really important way to unlock liquidity to support green infrastructure in the ASEAN region. We've worked very closely with the ICC on building common standards, and through this and through opportunities in public and private partnerships, we believe there's a great opportunity to unlock financing and support for infrastructure.
So that's very interesting because that's about the sort of framework and what needs to be done in terms of how we're all understanding the rules of engagement, because I can certainly see far more collaboration in all sorts of ways. The Lord Mayor touched on technology, but what about just the kind of frameworks that are needed? Is there anything about the sort of building blocks, the financial expertise? Where are you coming in from the banking side?
Sure. It's about, I think, importantly, the support when it comes to development of capital markets is a key area for us. And I think that, you know, the support in governments and the issuance of green bonds, bonds first and foremost, and has been a key area for us over the past decade. And of course, with infrastructure and with green infrastructure and the development, the issuance of green bond is what we see as a key opportunity to set the standards for the market to follow on.
That's brilliant. I was also going to move now to Nazir to just pick up on some of the points you touched on around the sort of IPO and the development of the frameworks there.
Thank you. In my speech, I talked about some frustration about the pace of ASEAN economic integration. And I think one of the issues was we were too ambitious. We talked about the ASEAN Stock Exchange, when really there's no appetite ever for an ASEAN Stock Exchange, in my view. But we can do more together. And one of the kind of simpler ways to move forwards on capital market integration is to develop a framework for ASEAN IPOs, or rather listing in domestic markets and raising money with an ASEAN prospectus. So you can raise money from any market across ASEAN. Then you kind of reduce the friction that always comes with sort of combining exchanges, etc. So that is a big push for us this year. I think the other area of integration that we're focused on is this concept that we are innovating called the ASEAN Business Entity. And this is very relevant for the HSBCs, the Standard Chartereds, and so on, where we've basically said again, look, ASEAN promised us in 2007, there's an ASEAN Charter, which said that we want an ASEAN economic community by 2015, which will be single production-based, free movement of people, capital, and so on and so forth. Come 2015, we were nothing like what was promised. A lot of progress, but not quite what was promised. And when you look into the details, there's no appetite in ASEAN to be EU. There's no appetite for free movement of people or completely porous borders with capital and so on and so forth. So you've got to find clever ways of bringing the region closer together. So we've argued that, okay, but at the same time, We want the economies of scale. We talk about the 680 million people market, but then most people look at ASEAN and say, you're still too fragmented to call yourself 680 million people. So how do you square the circle? You square the circle by actually enabling companies to have those enabling rules for movement of people, for outsourcing of back office, etc. So this is what we're pushing for from the business sector. Please, governments, introduce the ASEAN business entity, where if you are badged an ASEAN business entity, then you are allowed within yourself to move your ASEAN people across. You're allowed to share systems, share data across your organization. So if you imagine if we did this for HSBC, for instance, what that would mean in terms of reducing dyssynergies of operating in multiple markets.
Yeah, there's a huge stimulus there for where practical steps could be taken. If I may, Alistair, coming back to you, you touched on it, technology, innovation. How do you make that come to life? What's the messages for all of us in terms of collaboration to make it happen?
Yeah, I think that London is serious as it is to be the global hub for financial and professional services. Then I think that we do need to be absolutely some early adopters in relation to so many of the suites of technologies that are available to us. And so hence I do think there's a... Apologies. Thank you. So I do think that there's a great onus on us in the United Kingdom to make sure that our organisations are as tech savvy as we can be. And certainly some of the things we're doing here in London is trying to do deals with some of the big companies, the tech companies, along the AI side, other elements to give ourselves a more of an advantage along those lines. But I think it's a case of really it's a mix of this extraordinary technologies, but also old-fashioned, jumping on planes and banging on doors. I think that's really the way that we'll build our businesses, because there's no substitute for that. You really cannot build your business, dressed in your onesie, working from home. You can't do that, and I've tried. And I think that you have to jump on those planes, you have to bang on the doors, you have to go around to these remarkable markets in ASEAN, to so many of them, and just relentlessly get the message across. And that's certainly the message I'm giving to British businesses in order to grow in ASEAN.
Thank you. From a personal perspective, from the CSI, I don't think we've ever seen so much interest in AI ethics. As a chartered body, we've probably seen more interest from the ASEAN region recently than we've had in decades. And that's not to say that there isn't even more coming. So I think professional services is a unique selling point from the UK, doesn't get talked about enough. I've got one more question for you, Stephanie, before I opening up. You're on 5 minutes notice, questions coming to the audience, but it's about that customer experience. So we've heard a lot about the sort of digitization and the organization and the kind of operational stuff, but how does it feel to be, as it were, a customer in this new ever-growing region? We heard a lot about the SMEs, 99%, so they are potential growth customers. How are you approaching that?
Thanks for the question. We heard the digital economy is reaching $100 billion in ASEAN, and that's a very fast-moving economy. There's a lot of innovation in the UK, and there's an opportunity to marry those two things. For banks, the digital economy is a great opportunity to accelerate access to finance, to small enterprises, but also to digitize trade. Trade is an area which is still very paper heavy, creates a lot of friction. If you need, physical documents to release something from a port, for an SME, that is very costly because it's cost on its working capital. It makes it more prone to fraud. So one, digitization of trade is a big opportunity. And we hear from Malaysia the ambition around data and trade. Singapore, of course, has been an early adopter of the MELTR, which creates a fantastic framework for the industry to come together, not just banks, but governments and logistics companies and shippers, to really digitize trade and unlock that opportunities for SMEs. The second piece is around platforms. We heard about it, cross-border, sitting on your couch in Malaysia and ordering from Vietnam or vice versa. Platforms are a big opportunity to give access to finance to small and medium enterprises because they present an economy of scale, fast access data that enables to take better, faster risk decisions. So if I take an example, and you can do that also anchoring around some of the regional champions. We supported Thai Union Group, which most of you will know, the Thai conglomerate with a supply chain finance program, which really was about accelerating access to liquidity for its suppliers and relying on the strength of the anchor corporate to provide that access to finance, but also for the corporate itself to build resiliency around their supply chain, which in this ever-evolving world is critical for companies' growth.
I couldn't agree more on the resilience point, and that's the thing that we're all going to be tested on, the more digitization, it's the stability of the systems and so on. I'm going to opening up to the audience, a couple of questions from people. I don't know if anyone wants to lead, come on. If not, I've got another one. My next question then, in the absence of one for the audience, was if you literally could change one thing overnight, what would make the biggest difference?
I think it's there needs to be a mindset change in British business, and I think that we used to be so good at getting out into region and to sell what we have to offer, and I think we've, because of our risk parameters. Because of the chief risk officers within organisations and I think just the sort of mindset of British companies, we are not getting out in the way that we used to, and so I think there needs to be a sort of mindset change here in the United Kingdom to go off to these extraordinary, sort of frontier markets, some of which are in ASEAN, markets that are growing at 5%, 6%, 7%. If your economy is growing at 7%, your economy is doubling every 10 years, and so just the opportunities for British business are remarkable, particularly when my experiences in ASEAN and elsewhere in the region are that people want to buy what British businesses have to sell. They really do, and the British brand is still hugely respected and a brand that people want to buy into. But I just think, I was in India just 2 weeks ago, and effectively the question was, where are the Brits? Where are you? French, German, American, and Chinese businesses were all there. Very few Brits, and so I think the same is same elsewhere. We have to get back on planes. We have to start banging on doors once again.
I agree. As I've just come back from Colombo in Sri Lanka, 5% growth predicted. I've never seen greater appetite for British systems, British innovation, and British enterprise. Nazir, come on.
No, I wanted to agree with that 110%. I grew up in corporate finance, and those days, a good corporate financier in Malaysia was known as a CPA, cut paste artist. We would cut paste what was done in the city, and we would just use it back in KL. So we would come here, bang on doors, and say, "Please tell me how you do it." Well, the world has changed, and now we are, everyone's coming to ASEAN, and this visit has actually reminded me how much excellence there is here in the UK in many fields. In infrastructure, in green finance, in fintech, etc. There is a lot. But actually, when I think about our companies, when we want to embrace these things, we don't naturally think about the UK as we used to. So I couldn't agree more. And I was telling Lord Vasey yesterday, this year at the ASEAN Business and Investment Summit, we will have the right apps in place so that you can come and arrange the right meetings. I'm not in favor of coming to these big junkets where, thousands of people and you just hang around. I want people to come, bring the right people, and we will pre-arrange the right meetings with the right people for you. That's how you get business done. There's a Malay saying, tak jumpa, tak cinta. You must meet to fall in love. So please, this year, come out to the Far East, bring the right people at the right level, and we will help you engage. Thank you.
Yeah, I think for the audience, note that is a very attractive invitation. Thank you. Stephanie.
Both of those are music to my ears. As the largest international bank in the UK with presence in ASEAN countries, it is the core of our mission to help companies bridge those gaps and actually build the opportunities. So we, very frequently have delegations coming in, showcasing the best of British business, but similarly bringing British businesses over to ASEAN to get a taste for what this incredible growth opportunity is. Stuart said it, the US and Europe are the prime sort of trading partners of the UK, but there is an incredible growth opportunity. So we look forward to supporting it.
Very good. I think we take away from that growth, and we've got to make it happen. Don't miss on the opportunity. I'm sure there is at least a question. So come on, before we wrap up, we've got the last couple of minutes. I won't pick on anybody I already know, but go on. David Banks, Standard Chartered.
Thank you. I'd just like to double down on something that Stephanie said. And that is the importance of digitizing trade processes and systems and digitalizing. The availability of finance for SMEs could be a real game changer for access and inclusion into international markets. But in a world where trade finance costs are increasingly stretched and there are greater pressures as a result of geopolitical tensions, supply chain shifts, one thing we can do is make trade more efficient. So having those MLETR aligned pieces of legislation in each ASEAN country would be really fantastic. But there's more that the UK and ASEAN themselves can do together to trial some of the more innovative digital trade processes like the cross-border use of digital trade assets that can really support bolstering trade flows. So it's less of a question, more of a general point, and I think Stephanie's exactly right. And what the work that's being done in ASEAN to ease some of the duplicative frictions is really important for banks like us.
Thank you very much. I think that's a good point on which to close, because that's a very good observation. Just falls to me to say thank you very much. Thank you, Stephanie Nazir, and very much the Lord Mayor. Thank you, Alistair. It sounds like there's a lot of opportunities. I take away spirit of innovation, collaboration, and making it happen. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much to our great panel. A lot of love in that. So Jatuh Cinta, fall in love with ASEAN. So thank you. Lord Mayor, Tan Sri Nazir, Stephanie and Tracy for that excellent discussion. We've got one more session before our break. And this one is going to be really, really interesting. ASEAN in a multipolar world would normally be a very straightforward conversation, but we no longer live in a straightforward world. To help us understand what on earth is happening, I'd like to invite Su Wei Jiang, a partner, Strategic International Markets, PwC UK, and board director at the UK-ASEAN Business Council, to come on up and introduce her stellar panel that will help dissect and help us understand the world's changes and the impact on ASEAN.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan. Is it working? Is it working? Yeah. Can you hear me? Hopefully, yeah.
We can. The whole world can hear you.
Thank you, Alan. Well, when Alan rang me and asked me to come and chair this panel, I thought it was mission impossible to cover geopolitics in half an hour, or actually 28 minutes. Now it's being made even harder because we were running late and I'm standing between you and the coffee and the pastries outside. So I'll do my best. But I'm pleased to say I'm not on my own, because I am being helped by a very distinguished panel, and I'm going to invite them onto the stage one by one. First of all, we have Dr. Linda Yu, CBE, who is a fellow of economics at the Oxford University, but also a professor at London Business School. And Linda also holds various non-executive director position at large multinational corporates. So not just in academia, you have a lot of practical business experiences too. And you've written and edited 11 books, and the latest one has been voted the best economics books by the FT, which is called Great Crashes, Lessons Learned and How to Overcome Them. Sorry, small footnote, I'm not getting any commission for promoting Linda's book. Dr. Linda, you, please. And then next, we have another geopolitical analyst and also journalist as well, James Crabtree, who used to write for distinguished media like FT, but you are currently, James, at the European Council as a distinguished fellow in foreign relations. Please come to the stage, James. Great. And Martin, you've been mentioned many times already by a lot of people this morning. So HM Trade Commissioner to Asia Pac, a very large patch to cover, and you took on the role in September 2023. But previously to that, you worked in Tokyo and Cairo for a number of years, and also working for BCG in the private sector and with many, many multinational clients around the world. So welcome, Martin, to the panel. Yes. So what we're going to do today in the next 25 minutes or so, I mean, there's a lot happening in the world, and it's almost kind of, you know, I keep saying to my clients and my colleagues, it's almost not worthwhile actually talking about geopolitics these days, because the world gets turned upside down many times over, I think, in a single day. But to actually cut through the noises and then looking at the fundamentals is how I would encourage people to look at things these days. So I'm hoping that with the help of my panelists today is to actually help us to look at some of those fundamentals and what ASEAN should be doing in terms of the regional stability and economic resilience, as well as what the role that UK and James, I think, will explore a little bit around Europe as well, sort of more widely, can do in this kind of mad world we live in. So I will sit down at that point, so you don't have to look up at me. Linda, maybe I come to you first. Recently, I've been following quite a lot of your works and also, you know, your speeches. I think you used the word recently, instead of multipolar, I think you're talking about multi-aligned world. Maybe can you explain that a little bit more to us, and also especially in that sort of ASEAN context, what does that mean for ASEAN?
Thank you. Thank you very much. And firstly, it's a pleasure to be here. I consider myself an honorary ASEAN member because I had the pleasure of living in Singapore for a few years. So it is fantastic to be back here. And Alan, when he invited me, he did get me in trouble the last time I spoke at this event, because I think at that point I said I had been to all but one ASEAN country, and I immediately got asked which one.
Brunei? Yeah, I guess.
I've now been to all ASEAN countries, just for the record. But it really is a pleasure to be here, because I actually think that UK and ASEAN, we have huge opportunities in this multi-aligned world. Now, so you know, I didn't come up with this term. I got it from someone who said they got it from someone. And so whoever made up this term, we're really sorry we can't give you credit, but it's a great term because we are used to hearing about a multipolar world. So there's multiple poles of growth. A multi-aligned world says there's multiple alignments. And coming specifically to ASEAN, strategic neutrality, that's actually a really good way of encapsulating what this actually means, because there was a time when you can talk about commercial things, which is different from geopolitics. But even that term today has been changed. We now talk about geoeconomics, because geopolitics affects so much of what happens in the economic arena. So to maneuver that, a multi-aligned world means that a country, a region, a bloc could have multiple alignments themselves. So I know all of you are financial sector experts, so you'll know what I mean when I say, when you think of asset allocation, you could think of your your house model or your strategic allocation, but you would also do some tactical allocations. And in this day and age where everything we say here could be expired, what time is it in the US right now? In a few hours.
On the East Coast.
Yeah, so having, I think, tactical positioning on your alignments is not a bad way to be nimble. And I think ASEAN and the UK are very well positioned to do this. So to wrap up, what I mean by multi-alignment is you align with some countries and trading partners and investment colleagues on some things that you would want to cooperate on, you want to compete with, but there may be other issues where you align differently. So just like in a portfolio, you have where you need to be on the longer term, but you need to be nimble in the shorter term. And I think that is the reality of the era in which we live, which has been described as the era of great power competition. So I'll just finish on that thought. So what does that mean? I think you've heard me give this example. It's a joke. It's the only way I can really explain it. So Larry Summers said, if you ask Americans in their heart of hearts, they really just want to be the G1. The version for China is China likes to say if you deal with them, it's a win-win, but that normally means that China wins twice. And my favorite one is actually the European Union version, which is if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so in this era, we partner, we compete. That is what markets are about. But I think there'll be certain things that we align differently. And I think that is the reality for the next few years.
Great. Well, thank you, Linda. I want to hold a thought on the geoeconomics. I'll come back to you later on just to explore that a bit more. But just on the point of alignment, and James, if I can come to you, I really like your analogy at the sort of last bit there. James, would you agree with what Linda just talked about in terms of that alignment and alignment at every single level, sort of strategic all the way down to tactical and operational for companies, and especially in the context of US rolling out and evolving is not even enough to describe how the foreign policy and economic policy are changing every day. I mean, what does that mean for ASEAN in your view?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. Before I say that, thank you very much for the invitation. I just moved back from Singapore, so Canary Wharf seemed like a very appropriate place to be. I got totally lost in an underground high-end mall coming here, and that felt like a very Singaporean experience. To answer that, if you don't mind, let me sort of take a little jump back and address, in a sense, the elephant in the room that I asked the minister about, which is, everything in the region and the relationship that the region has with other powers comes down to the Americans at the moment. So I think it's important to kind of give a sense of what's going on there. My sense was that Southeast Asia, in common with much of Asia, was much less panicked about Trump when he came in. And with my ECFR hat on, we've done some polling on this, looked at countries in the region, which shows that India was incredibly positive about Trump. A country like Indonesia was more positive than negative. So particularly for a European audience, it's important to remember that not every part of the world is anywhere near as kind of spooked about what's happening in the US. I think that may be changing now, as in the events of the last few weeks have been so dramatic, both on the economic and geopolitical side, that in a sense, the slightly more sort of cool-headed attitude towards changes in Washington that you saw originally in capitals in Southeast Asia and throughout much of US-allied Asia, I think has become gradually more panicked because the changes are very profound. Just very briefly, in a sense, the original worries you would have found were economic disruption and US-China tension. The assumption was that the tariffs would not be good and that Trump would come in and he would be very kind of pugilistic towards China. In a sense, you now have two more worries which are more present. One of which, I was speaking to a senior diplomat in the region who said, in a sense, if we have to pay tribute to the Americans now, if we're going to spend our time trying to work out what we have to give to them, well, maybe we should just stick with the tributary system that we've known historically, if you see what I mean. And so, people are thinking carefully about as the relationship with the United States is changing to become
As Minister Ng said, the Singaporean Defence Minister at the Munich Security Conference, he said it's like a landlord looking for rent. So people have to, it's astonishing to hear a minister say something like that, but it does tell you how far we've come. And then the second issue, which is even more profound, are the questions about the US long-term commitment to the region as a whole. To put it very bluntly, is it plausible now to imagine the US doing to Taiwan what they just did to the Ukrainians? If you're Japan or Korea, then this is an almost existential concern because you don't have a backup plan. We in Europe face a very difficult situation with our relationship with the US. But as Donald Tusk said at the weekend, it is absurd that 500 million Europeans are going on bended knee to 300 million Americans to save them from 120 million Russians. There is a narrow path to a better future in which Europe rearms and has a favorable balance of power with a much weaker adversary. That's not true if you're Japan or the Republic of Korea. And it creates a problem in Southeast Asia as well. The hard-headed geopolitics of Southeast Asia is that you want the Americans there because it provides a balance in the region. And so if the Americans are going to be less committed to the region, not just in the traditional way of not showing up to the ASEAN summits, but in a more profound way, kind of potentially pulling back from various security commitments, then that creates a lot of, you need to be quite strategically adept to cope to this. And this is where I answer your question, and this is the last thing I'll say, which is yes. So what do you see in the region? You see people looking for balancing opportunities, and it's complicated, but the Philippines at the moment is developing new defense relationships with Japan, Canada, and the United Kingdom, to take one example. And I think you'll see a lot of that. There are probably 4 basic options you have for balancing. One is the kind of the US allies, the Australia and Japan, Korea. You have the Europeans, including the UK. You have the Middle East and you have India. So those are that's basically your choice set. If you're worried that the Americans are at least much less reliable, more difficult to read than they used to be, then yes. So I think Linda's exactly right. You'll see an attempt to try and make up a little bit of what you may be about to lose in terms of the behavior of the US as a reliable strategic partner.
And then just, I think on that point, is also looking at, I think, Linda, you refer to as the competition of great powers in a current environment. And, but then I think, in addition to hard power, I think the soft power question is actually very important. There was a quote in an FT article over the weekend on Americans losing soft power. It's saying actually President Trump is very concerned about throwing out free riders, but he tends to forget America still has to earn the right to drive the bus in the first place. I thought that was actually quite interesting. And then, Martin, actually just leading on from that, in the past, I think, you cover a quite wide region in addition to ASEAN, also, the rest of the Asia Pac, except for China and Hong Kong, mainland China and Hong Kong. So, I mean, what's the mood on the ground, just, given everything you've heard so far, but also I just, rapidly kind of, I think US in danger, I wouldn't say necessarily already losing soft power, but in danger of losing that soft power and influencing the region. What are you actually seeing and hearing? What's the mood?
Thank you so much, and it's absolutely brilliant to be here. It probably won't surprise you that the mood is focused and it's ambitious. I think everyone in this room knows that Southeast Asia and the Indo-Pacific region more widely is not a region that faces volatility and starts to think doom and gloom and gives up. This is the epicenter of global growth. We know that 50% of the world's middle class will live in the region by 2040. And it's a region that sees volatility and it takes it as a business opportunity and a business challenge. That volatility will lead to winners and losers, and the only way to be one of the winners is to engage at pace, with gusto, and in a business-like commercial fashion. I'd really agree with the points that economics and commerce are at the epicenter of all of our geopolitics now. Everything is coming down to economics and commerce. And in many ways, actually, for the region, it has done for a while. And I think particularly in Southeast Asia, those countries and governments are really experts at balancing interests across competing powers and markets. And I think the UK is particularly well positioned now. Not only has the UK developed a deep tapestry of trading agreements at a bilateral level, but through our dialogue partner status with ASEAN, it really feels that that's maturing now, with things like the Economic Integration Programme now going pretty much at full pelt. We are fully engaged in the Digital Economy Framework Agreement, very much looking forward to substantive conclusion of that later this year, and building on the opportunities that come off the back of that. One thing that also aligns us is the principal focus of all our governments is now economic growth. And we know that economic growth internationally is delivered by very genuine partnerships that are set up for the long term rather than short-term transactional benefit. So we are entering a period of volatility, but also enormous opportunity. And the only way that the UK and our friends and allies can deal with that is to engage fully, to use the, frankly, quite incredible networks of support that the UK and our allies have in the region. You know, it's brilliant to be hosted here by HSBC, that the prestige and the commitment of the UK financial professional banking system is incredible. You know, up in Birmingham today, we've got NatWest supporting a roadshow. We've got 1,000 businesses joining that over 2 weeks. We have a fantastic network of alliances, the UKABC. I can see some executive directors of British Chambers of Commerce in the audience. This is a great community that's now in place with a very determined mission. And we've got to approach the next months and years with ambition, with really scientific focus. But this is not something that's beyond any of us. We have to engage, and we have to engage positively.
Absolutely, and Martin, I really like that sort of positive sentiment you have been painting there, which is, I think, I'm sure, shared by all the audience here today, but also online. And then that goes to exactly the heart of the fundamentals I was referring to. I think at the beginning, there are a lot of fundamentals that's right and presents lots of opportunities. But I do still want to be provocative and pick up some problems. Sorry, just on your note there. But Linda, coming back to you, I mean, geoeconomics and this whole weaponization of trade that Trump has sort of started fast and furious. Oh, it's working now. Fast and furious since he came into power on the 20th of January. That actually poses a lot of problems to companies and businesses operating in the region, be it multinational in the region, but also regional businesses based there as well. Over the last 4 or 5 years, who adopted the China +1 strategy, are really seriously worried about where is the supply chain going to go, where is the next target country for tariff increase. And Vietnam, say, for example, has the third largest trade surplus with US after Canada and Mexico, and then looking what's happening with Mexico and Canada right now. So I just wondered, what's your perspective on that, and then what can company do in this sort of uncertain environment when trade is being used as one of the probably the biggest and most effective weapon now for geopolitics in Trump's eyes. I'm not saying everybody's eyes.
Thank you, Sue. So I think it's a really good question because it gets to the practicalities of how you maneuver in this system. So indeed, this is an article I wrote in Forbes a couple of weeks ago, which basically said companies which have China +1 strategies, both for diversification of geoeconomic risk, but also because of rising wages in China, those supply chains are now increasingly, I think, they need to be looked at. And the reason is because the Trump administration is very focused on unfair trade, and a trade surplus in goods is a proxy for unfair trade. So almost by definition, if you're a connector country in trade, you are going to be a trade surplus country because the US has a structural trade deficit, current account deficit. So you can be an import market, you can be an export market, but if you're literally part of the supply chain that's coming out of China or Asia, which still dominates in the production of many manufactured goods, then I think it's a bit of a moving target. So if you look at Vietnam, before, years ago, before the China Plus One strategy kicked in, it wasn't a top 5 country in terms of having a trade surplus. And it also affects Europe. Hungary now receives more foreign direct investment from China than Germany, France, and Italy put together. So what we need, how do you manage that? Well, I think was mentioned earlier today, we need a better use of digital capabilities to monitor your supply chains, because you need to be aware of where disruptions, tariffs, trade restrictions can come in. And I think financial services have a big role to play in that, because supply chain management is also financial. So you can be capital light in supply chains. You can be asset light these days. You don't have to actually go and build your own warehouse. A disclaimer, I sit on the board of a warehouse, Europe's biggest warehouse company, but I'm a non-exec, so, but and I think also they're also Europe's biggest data centers. So this is my 2 caveats. And then, so therefore, data becomes really important to have trade agreements, for instance, that remove data localization requirements, because it makes ASEAN a much more attractive place to place supply chains if you can easily manage distribution networks. And the UK has been leading in terms of putting digital chapters into free trade agreements, makes the UK also a fantastic place to manage your distribution chains. And to me, this is one of the reasons why this kind of forum really matters, because you're bringing together policymakers, businesses, talking about needs and then coming out with a solution. And I just want to pick up your point about soft power. So I've been appointed to the UK Soft Power Council, which is co-chaired by the Foreign Secretary and the Culture Secretary. And the mandate that I'm looking after is growth. And I have no doubt this is a fantastic time to be not the US or China when it comes to soft power. Because I think countries which are growing, which are open, vibrant, and consistent and transparent, have real opportunities at a time when the superpowers, are vying for power. So, yeah, it's basically. And so it's not about not working with them, but it's about having many options. And at the end of the day, as we all know, risk diversification doesn't mean risk elimination. It means risk mitigation through having options. And so to me, that's why today is particularly worthwhile, and why I think the UK is really well positioned to do this, as well as ASEAN.
Great. No, thank you. Just picking up your option point, and James, if I can come to you on that options point. What options do you think, just UK or more broadly, I'm thinking you're also with your EU sort of hat on as well, what options does Europe have in relation to its relationship with ASEAN, especially given the kind of the shifting sand, if I can call it, in the defense picture as well with Ukraine and other things happening. What do you see that as, is it an opportunity for Europe, or is it more of a challenge and threat?
No, I think everyone is looking around, looking for anyone who has a serious relationship with the United States, economic or security, which is, most countries in this room are looking around for alternative options. And so that does create opportunities. ASEAN is one of those. I think a lot of this comes down to the sort of question of what happens between the United States and China, as in the range of potential sort of states of that bilateral relationship is simply much wider than it was. As in, I think most people assumed that when Trump came in the second term, as in his first, then the relationship would deteriorate. He hired lots of China hawks. The sort of structural underpinnings of the relationship point towards competition. But as Matt Turpin, who's a NSC staffer in the first Trump administration, said, is Trump thinking about a China deal? I mean, of course he is when he's awake. He's always thinking about a deal. And the question is, well, what will that deal look like? How broad will it be? Will it simply be a kind of rehash of the first Trump administration, in which you have a kind of trade-related deal? Or could it be something more broad, investment in exchange for lowering of technology restrictions, for instance, or something even broader, the kind of grand geostrategic bargain that people are speculating about? I mean, I think that latter option is unlikely. But nonetheless, in a sense, the relationship between the UK and other players like ASEAN or Europe and ASEAN depends fundamentally on the sort of state of this most important relationship. I think what you'll see in most cases is countries will try and improve their relationships with China. So that will be true for Europe, the United Kingdom, in order not to have tension with both superpowers at once. And then, yes, they'll look for other balancing relationships. India will be a big one. I think people, in a sense, that you see a lot of attention on India at the moment, but ASEAN will be another, as you try and kind of create a better balance and try and see what the steady state will be in the relationship with the US.
And Martin, maybe you sort of bringing it back specifically to trade and to your role. We talked about CPTPP slightly this morning, but let's not forget there are other regional economic trade agreements as well, say, for example, RCEP. I wonder, sort of from where you sit, what advice or practical advice would you give to businesses when they look at the trading relationship or increasing trade with ASEAN as an alternative market if one has to turn away from the US? I mean, some of my SME clients are having to do that right now. What practical advice would you give them?
So I think it's really worth organisations of every size taking time to understand what the specific agreements offer. So many countries are now covered by CPTPP, everyone's favourite acronym, as well as bilateral agreements, and understanding the specific elements within them that are applicable to your business. With CPTPP, I think it's worth mentioning three things. There's the headline reduction in tariffs on goods and services. That's often a subject of media attention because the media will say that the value is relatively low at this stage. Actually, it's really important to us in terms of ASEAN because for the first time ever, we have a free trade agreement with Brunei and Malaysia, best part of £400 billion of economy that's opened up now to British business in a way it just wasn't before. However, that number's going to grow because CPTPP, by its very nature, is designed to expand. Indeed, that's how the UK got our place as part of the club. There's one accession working group going on at the moment. There will inevitably be more, and £12 trillion at the moment in terms of total GDP. That number is only going to increase. And the Auckland Principles set out very clearly how parties can join CPTPP. So that number is only going to grow. The two things that never really get talked about in the media about CPTPP, one is accumulation and where product moves between CPTPP countries to then end up as a final good. That enables a change in complexity of supply chains that can be very advantageous in current geopolitical conditions. And therefore, the value for that is really hard to estimate, but we're seeing practically on the ground businesses starting to use that from the off. And we're seeing a very strong increase in the utilisation of those provisions. And the other thing to mention is investment protections for CPTPP. So these agreements really are significant. They give the economies of scale that the Minister was talking about earlier, but they also introduce some of the advocacy of open and free trade under a rules-based international system. The three Auckland principles for CPTPP are that for any party to join CPTPP, firstly, it has to have very high standards of trade. Secondly, it has to have a track record of compliance with the international rules-based system. And thirdly, it has to achieve consensus of all parties within the agreement in order for it to join. And I think they are particularly incisive tests that really do help to structure global trade and a rules-based system in the absence of a fully functioning WTO. So I think there's tremendous potential there. And actually what we're seeing as the UK as the newest member of CPTPP, lots of countries are speaking to us about how we joined. And these are really fruitful discussions, because whereas joining CPTPP itself is, probably a minimum of 2 years off, that was a fast process for the UK. It would likely be fast for others as well, but it's still 2 years away. There are things we're doing with that agreement right here, right now, across markets to break down market access barriers on the basis that for those markets that wish to join CPTPP, they have to have that high standards of trade across the board, and therefore they're looking to see where they can move across different sectors and subsectors to start to prepare themselves for that. So it's everyone's favourite acronym, but it absolutely is giving us a huge amount of highly productive work.
And it has a rich context to it.
It really is.
Going back to basics is
Absolutely.
what you're saying, is actually learning the fundamentals, James. Yeah.
Just one tiny point, since we're talking about CPTPP. So you asked about Europe. Ursula von der Leyen and all of the European commissioners went to Delhi last week. It really does look like Europe will try and do a trade deal with India by the end of the year, which is a very radical departure, because they won't be able to do a proper trade deal. They're going to do a sort of minimal, sort of light trade deal, which Europe has never done before because of the current geopolitical situation. The other huge sort of geopolitical opportunity here is for some sort of cooperation between the European Union and CPTPP. And the trade experts have always said it can't be done. They're very different systems. The European Union can't join the CPTPP. It has to be some form of cooperation. But that is the gap in the market, to bring together these two giant trading areas in one form or another, given the sort of removal of the Americans from the picture.
Absolutely, yeah. So in the one remaining 30 seconds, I'm just going to, I am achieving it, going to very quickly for each of the panelists, what are your 3 top words you want to leave the audience with as part of, the learnings or takeaways from this session? Who would want to go first? I won't want to pick. Are there 3 words?
I think the 3 words that are going to dominate our attention for the next foreseeable future are going to be Trump, Trump, and Trump.
Linda, what?
I would say growth, collaboration, and growth. Everything that we have said, I've written a couple of economic history books. The golden age of economic growth was the 1950s and 60s. Per capita incomes were strong, standards of living were vibrant, and people enjoyed prosperity. That was the height of the Cold War. It is absolutely possible to grow and to be prosperous, so long as you're strategic in how you do it. And what I really think is promising about the UK and ASEAN is the focus I've heard this morning is just on that. It's on growth. Yeah. If you can get growth right and you are smart, you use smart power, which is a term that encompasses both hard and soft power, and you do it with countries that are aligned with you, you become much more important in the world economy that's fractured and fragmented. So to me, it's all there for us to seize. So anyway, so when you start thinking, oh my God, let me look at these news headlines, just remember, we could be living in the Bay of Pigs 1960s Cuba Missile Crisis era. So.
Great. Thank you.
I do sound very British sometimes. It could be worse.
Welcome to the club. I've had more time to think, so I'll give 3 different words. So planning, persistence, and partnership. I think those 3 things, if delivered, will give us the ambition and the structure to succeed in a more volatile world.
Fantastic. And I think Ian would agree with me. Those are the 3 words we live by as a board as well at UKABC. Yeah. Well, fantastic. I managed to overrun slightly, but I think you agree with me, we could be here all day talking about this. Let's put our hands together for our panelists. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
My 3 words would be thank you, brilliant, networking. That was an excellent panel. Thank you so much, Sue. We're going to have a break now for networking. We'll have 25 minutes for a quick refresh. Please join us back in the room in 25 minutes where we'll have two excellent sessions, one looking at talent mobility in ASEAN and the other one looking at the global challenges of sustainable energy transition and artificial intelligence and the impact that that is having on Southeast Asia. So refreshments are outside. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, and we'll be right back for those of you online in about 25 minutes. Thank you. We'll get underway in the interest of time. Because we've got an excellent discussion on a very important topic for Southeast Asia, which is on talent mobility. We're looking at the movement of talent, talent without borders. There's lots to cover, and we've got a fantastic panel with Helen Brand, the Chief Executive of ACCA and UKABC Board Director, Jeannie Chua, the Global Mobility Manager at Mott MacDonald, based in Singapore, and Freya Thomas-Monk, the Senior Vice President at Pearson and UKABC Board Director, is chairing this session. Freya, over to you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. We love the topic of talent mobility, and we're looking forward to spending half an hour with you now to talk it through. If you have questions, I'll be happy to take some at the end, I hope. I also have plenty of things to be quizzing my colleagues Helen and Jeannie about here. When we think about talent mobility, I think for me, there's the question of education. So how do we ensure that our talent has the education that they need? We heard earlier from the Lord Mayor about the proportion of trade that is with the financial services. I think lots of us in the room would like to see more trade between the UK and ASEAN for the education businesses we have in the UK, which are numerous and fantastic, and I'm completely biased, working as I do in Pearson, but I'm not the only one on the panel who may feel that way. And then secondly, when we think about talent, is it in the right place? What are the skills gaps? Where do we see demand? And how is it all changing in the era of digital and AI? So we will begin to launch into that. And I suspect that lots of us in the room have had experience of education and work within the ASEAN region as well as in the UK. I know that I do. It was really formative to my career and my experience. So I'm just grateful to have had that. It feels like a real privilege, but it also feels like time to hand that on. How do we ensure that other people get that experience of education and working within the ASEAN region? Because it really is important for how we deliver more trade links, more collaboration, and how we deliver growth in the trade between the UK and the ASEAN region. So I'm going to come to you first, Helen, if I may. And my question is, what are the current needs and gaps for talent in ASEAN?
Okay. Well, I think we're time limited, so because there could be a very long answer. First of all, to say, of course, the needs across the region are different, and this is something we always have to remember about most of the things we talk about when we talk about ASEAN. It's not one need and one thing, but as we'll talk about when we get to mobility, I guess we need to integrate as far as we can. And there's a common gap, which I think we find across the globe, which is education being provided does not necessarily meet the needs of business. And so it's that alignment with market need, with the education effort, which is difficult and where you can see a gap. So ACCA itself, we work at all levels, whether it's vocational training, the kind of agreements we have in Vietnam and the Philippines, where there's a need for a mass upskilling in terms of basic financial literacy and knowledge that lead towards opportunities further down the line in people's careers, right through university education, through to the professional and higher level skills that are needed. And, you can find a gap pretty much in every part of ASEAN when you're looking at that. Then you overlay the two big themes, which we've heard a lot about already today, sustainability and tech, and particularly AI. In sustainability field, I think that really is wide open in terms of how we educate people to drive sustainable business and then to comply with what are the increasing regulations and frameworks that apply to sustainability, whether it's in finance, in businesses itself, in your people policies, etc., etc. So there's a huge upskilling, and that's of existing people in the workforce, not those coming through. So the upskilling piece is substantial. We know that our students and members want to learn in that space, but it's trying to find the right content that aligns with the strategies and policies of the various countries in ASEAN. And again, the more that can be integrated, the better. And we're actually working with ASEAN back, Malaysia, to look specifically at that sustainability piece and put the education together with the ambition. On technology, there's a lot of fear and confusion, I think, around AI. We like to see it as opportunity. And ACCA produces a global talent trends survey, and we do have a segment specifically around ASEAN. What was very interesting that more than any other region in the world, our respondents to that survey saw AI as an opportunity. So 80+% were saying AI can help me deliver more value in my role, which is a really important finding. The same survey tells us that 59% of respondents in ASEAN don't feel that they're being developed with the skills they need for the future. So they see the opportunity, they see they could add more value, but there is that gap in terms of the technology skills. And I think we quite often think of technology skills in isolation, you know, technology roles, technology jobs. My view very strongly, we have to integrate technology capacity and capability with all roles. You know, it's going to be an integral part of every role that someone undertakes. So the earlier we can start in that education journey, the better people will be able to meet the employment and market needs of ASEAN.
Thanks so much, Helen. And I would just absolutely echo that. And the speed and pace of change in terms of what digital and technology skills people need to be learning is paramount. I see it in the context of the UK, but very much in the ASEAN region. We've been at Pearson doing some work in Vietnam with the semiconductor industry, and we've seen that in particular in place there. And the need to start this education really young in young people's lives, really at secondary school level, high school age, to really push it through and make sure that we're building the workforces of the future without skipping a beat as people come out of school, as people come out of uni and enter the workforce, to make sure they've got the education they need that is really fit for the future, for the role. So everything you say there echoes, Helen. Thank you. Jeannie, we'd love to bring you into this. Can you tell us a bit about what are the barriers to enhancing talent mobility across the region?
Sure. Can everyone hear me? Okay.
Yes.
So socioeconomic barriers such as wage disparity can hinder talent mobility within the region. So organizations like ourselves has been addressing this by offering higher salary for our employee to go on regional deployment. But we all know that this is not sustainable in the long run. Now, another significant barrier is that language differences across the member states in ASEAN can actually hinder talent mobility as well, because, you know, within an organization, having that common language of instructions just enhance collaboration as well as efficiency. So we just find it easier to move people who has a good command of English. Now, another 2 points that I just want to quickly make is that there continue to be societal and cultural barriers that's limiting women participation in high demand sectors within the region. And last but not least, the rural-urban divide. It's still quite pronounced in ASEAN region. Many of the talent management initiatives are concentrated in the urban areas, potentially leaving behind a significant portion of the rural population.
Thank you so much, Jeannie, and I absolutely hear what you're saying. The way the role of English of language in terms of the way we all collaborate and work together, I think that is often understated and actually is a key part of the relationship between the UK and ASEAN nations and how everyone works together. You're absolutely right. Female participation in the workforce, particularly in some industries, is very skewed. I've certainly seen that myself, and how we all support and work on that. I say that as an all-female panel, you notice. Thank you. And then finally, the urban-rural divide, and I'm assuming with that, the real pressure on transport links and how we make sure that there is the mobility and the ability. When we think about talent mobility, I think we often leap to thinking that means across international borders. It doesn't. I think it also very much means within countries and within regions itself.
Yeah, if I could just come on that, because I talked about technology in terms of what we're teaching people, but I think it's critical in terms of how we deliver education to people and how they learn new skills and capability. And the opportunity there now is immense, and that can bring in people who were previously excluded from educational opportunities, skills development opportunities. And we can be very, very innovative about that. And we can leapfrog old technologies. We all know that. We all heard the potential of mobile technology in bringing education to people who haven't had it before. So I think having that digital first strategy, not digital only, but digital first, is going to be a really helpful way to ensure that the right skills and opportunities are given to people.
Thanks so much, Helen. And Jeannie, I know you're based in Singapore, so it's fascinating to get your perspective. How do you think the UK and ASEAN, and in Singapore as well as the wider ASEAN, can better work together to address talent shortages?
I think in the previous panel, there was a lot of talk about the CPTPP. And UK joined the CPTPP last year, and several members of ASEAN are also in this agreement. So I would say is that the obvious one is to leverage on this trade agreement to incorporate talent mobility provisions and really just promote investment in key sectors. But the other thing is that private sectors like ourselves can play a significant role in the collaboration between UK and ASEAN. So just to illustrate this point, about 7 years ago, our Asia business actually sees a huge demand in renewable energy capabilities. But however, there was a skill gap in the market, and we couldn't hire anyone to meet that demand. So what we did is that we established a renewable energy academy in Thailand that is actually a development and learning programs for the rapid upskilling of our graduates, our non-renewable energy staff. And what we did there is that we actually sent skilled professionals from UK to set up this academy in Thailand. It's now a well-run, successful academy that kind of produces about 80 graduates every year across the Asia business. Now, this academy is also open to our client, and these success stories can be replicated in the other sectors. But not only that, if the government can provide grants and funding to support such initiative in the region, I would say that this is definitely a win-win solution.
It really is. I love that. Industry-specific academies based within the countries that need it most. And I think there is a point there about the UK. In the UK, we're talking about setting up 2 new data centres in the UK. It's been announced, one's in Oxfordshire and one elsewhere. And the research that we have at Pearson shows us that for every new role in the UK that's created around AI, there is at least one other new role created around the enabling industries. So it's the power networks, it's renewable energy, it's construction, in order to build these data centers and really power the digital economies of the future. So these are all interconnected, these industries, and the way we link the education together and the skills acquisition is key. Helen, I know do you want to jump in on that one?
Well, just on, I think another dimension of the way the UK and ASEAN can work together is around standards. I think that aligning educational standards and professional qualification standards really helps with that mobility challenge. And unless you have that baseline, it actually makes the MRAs and the mobility so much more challenging because you're trying to fill gaps and you're trying to assess those differences. The other thing I would say about that as well, I think there needs to be a concept of substantial equivalency in terms of recognition of professional qualifications. We do get into an industry of tick box, is it in this syllabus down here? Is it actually, do these people have the capability and capacity to add value to our businesses in whatever country that is? And I think that can really, that philosophy and a mindset can really help to accelerate that mobility and mutual recognition environment. So, but the starting point is those standards, whether it's your education frameworks, whether it's your professional qualification frameworks. You know, how can we work together? And the UK has a long history of working very effectively there. We also tend to adopt international standards where they exist in various professions, particularly accountancy. So, you know, those international standards help with strategic neutrality that was talked about earlier. You're not binding yourself to one, you know, regime or another. There is an international framework where the voice of ASEAN can be very well heard, and where they can be a rule creator as well as a rule taker.
I absolutely agree with you on the standard side. Do you have anything else there, Jeannie, that you'd like to share in terms of how we would align mutual recognition agreements and what needs to go into them?
I believe ASEAN currently has 8 mutual recognition agreements, and one of them actually pertains to engineering, which is the sector that Mott McDonald's operates in. Now, I think our engineers can register to the ASEAN Chartered Professional Engineer certifications to kind of work as a registered foreign professional engineers. So while the ACPE actually established the credibility and professional standings of the engineers, what happened is that it kind of falls short of unlocking significant value from an employer perspective, because the ACPE holder is not able to act as the endorsing engineers within the country. So I would say is that by enhancing and expanding the current MRA to ensure it aligns with industry needs, that's going to be quite a critical step today.
I absolutely agree, and we think we understand the target industries, we understand that they're linked together with one another, and the standards need to evolve quickly, but also very much, I agree, led by employers, making sure that it really is driven there. I also think the power of data and analytics to show that. I've always thought the best people to understand the standards and what's needed are the practitioners on the ground. And how do we use data to really understand what practitioners are needing to do? Engineers working in Malaysia, in Vietnam, what are we seeing and hearing in terms of demand from employers and in terms of customers? So really interesting to hear that perspective. Thank you. Let's shift a moment to think about policymakers. So we've talked about employers, we've talked about standards and what we see really helping drive growth and drive alignment and speed and reducing friction, if you like, in terms of getting business done and making sure the talent's in the right place. What advice do we have for policymakers to make that happen? Helen?
Wow, okay. Most of them have left the room, thankfully. But it's challenging. Look, all policymakers that I encounter want to understand industry needs. You know, that there's nobody saying, please don't give me the data or please don't give me the insight. So I think, first of all, business has to make sure that the compelling case is being made and that the voice of business is being properly conveyed in a way that supports and contributes to policy objectives. You know, it can't be pure self-interest. It has to be in the public interest. It has to be driving forward that growth agenda, which you know, we've heard from all governments and policymakers in recent months. So, what contribution can you make? What real insight and data can you provide? You know, at ASA we put a lot of effort into getting the voice of our members who are working in small businesses, large businesses, practices, the public sector, segmenting in that way, in a way that is useful, and then saying, these are the skills that are needed. Here are the tools you can use to create that. So I think it's seeing it as a positive and contributing effort rather than necessarily a confrontational one.
Thank you very much. And Jeannie, from your perspective, what's your advice for policymakers?
From an organization perspective, I think one of the regulatory barriers that we also face is the time-consuming and complex immigration processes that we see in the region. So my wish list is definitely to ask the policymakers to have a more streamlined immigration processes, but really just align with market best practices and implements e-governance solutions by leveraging on digital platform to streamline immigration processes for us. It's just going to help us to enhance our split of deployment across the different borders in ASEAN.
Absolutely right. Immigration's such a hot topic all the time, but you're right, it creates friction in the system, doesn't it, in terms of what's allowed, what's not, and the sheer amount of bureaucracy that needs to take place.
Immigration is the gateway to movement, so it's definitely a critical step.
It certainly is. So policymakers that haven't left the room, immigration is where we need to see some change. We could carry on talking like this, but I'd also like to open up the floor if anybody else would like to ask a question. Please, thank you. Do you want mine? No, come on, take mine.
Thank you. Really interesting panel. My name is David Kelly. I run the British Chamber of Commerce in Singapore and had the privilege and mostly the pleasure of running a professional institution in Asia. You've got an employer and you've got a professional body on the stage. And I think there's a massive opportunity for the UK to connect the two in terms of really helping the UK to partner with countries when they're trying to capacity build in specific areas. So my question for Helen is, what do you want more from employers that are employing those that you're accrediting through certain processes to make that stronger? And then for Jeannie, what is it that you want more from the professional institutions, the engineering institutions, to support your talent mobility in your organisations?
Sorry, could I just clarify from the employer what we want them to do?
What would you want more from employers in the market spaces overseas to help professional development, lifelong learning, that recognition of talent? And then on the other side, what is it that employers want from the professional bodies themselves to support that network?
Yeah, well, it's a word that at the moment is difficult, but it is about investment, you know, an investment in people. But we all talk about technology, etc. But we have a strong belief that talent trumps tech. If you don't have the people who understand it, who don't integrate it into their day-to-day work, if they can't deliver on that tech, your business is going to fail. So the investment in time, in the ability to upskill, as well as I talked about earlier, the pathway to initial qualifications, and making that systemic within the business and an organisation. For small businesses, that is sometimes a challenge. So I think through organisations which we're all part the networks we have, being able to support small businesses in that talent development piece is really, really critical. So if I was talking to policymakers, it's having that people element, people development piece at an equal level with other forms of investment that is going to help with the growth that everybody's seeking.
Thank you, Jeannie.
And for the question to me, I think from a professional body perspective, it's just that when you are creating that solution or putting that framework together, just make sure that there is a private sector inputs into your designing of the solution. It's very important that whatever you guys are lay out is going to meet the employer, because ultimately we are the user of the framework.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions? Thank you. It's coming round that way.
Hello, James Brooks from Cooper's Fire. I work in the fire industry, so I like all the talk about raising standards. You know, when we're talking about UK and Singapore, we're on quite a level playing field. Talent can move from Singapore to UK and UK to Singapore pretty easy because you've got high skill sets. Both countries have high wages, so it's quite easy to move over. If you look at the other Asian countries, how does the model in Singapore spread to the rest of the countries? Because, for example, Philippines, loads of investments, big projects, very low skill set. I hope I haven't offended anyone here, and low wages, being truthful. A very different model. It's very hard to go and set up in Philippines, not impossible. But so how do, I suppose, the Singapore business model, which is a small country, but a very, advanced high country, kind of move that model of skill set and standards which are high, like the UK? How do we spread that across the region?
Thanks so much. And just as I hand to Jeannie first, we have plenty of Pearson colleagues based in Philippines because they are fabulous at English. English language in Philippines, really, really good. Over to you, Jeannie.
Well, the question is meant for me because I'm from Singapore, right? Singapore is successful, but Singapore by itself is not big enough a country together. I would think the attention. I'm not a politician, but my take on this is that a lot of roles in Singapore takes on a regional role. These talent come to Singapore, but they have oversights for the region. And when you bring someone, a skilled professional, into Singapore with a regional experience, what the person gets to do is to perform work in the multiple countries around us and also transfer that skill set, that knowledge into the rest of the region as well. So that's one of the things that I think the rest of the region can leverage Singapore as a global talent hub for.
Thank you. Helen.
Yes, I think actually interesting, when I've been thinking about talent mobility here, I've been thinking about inter-ASEAN talent mobility and how, we can support that. And certainly, the fantastic talent we see throughout the region, whether that's Malaysia, whether it's Vietnam, and actually where probably the greater growth opportunities lie in terms of talent development for the future and growth for the future. I think that deserves a lot of attention. So I think the standards for ASEAN they're what need aligning, and that's where, as we've heard earlier today, the effort will be put to have realistic goals on how you allow that talent mobility to flourish in the region. So from my experience, when you have a common standard and a common qualification, there is no, fantastic though a Singaporean professional accountant might be, the Malaysian professional accountant is equally qualified, is equally capable, and that carries on throughout the region. It's about providing the right opportunities, pathways, incentives, support for people who might be in a rural area, who might be women who've not previously had access to education, to have the opportunity to achieve those standards. But it can be achieved right across the region and is achieved right across the region.
Great points. Thanks so much. I'm going to close this session by asking my colleagues here, if you had a magic wand and you could change one thing to improve talent mobility, what would it be? And as you think of your answers, I'll give mine quickly, which is start them young. I'm finding around the world, if we build in vocational education, high education standards through the high school onwards, it makes a massive difference to the talent readiness in the future. But to you, Helen?
For me, it would be work on the alignment of standards. You're not providing job mobility if you have to leave your qualification at the border.
Thank you.
Is to introduce a unified work visa that allows qualified professionals to work across the different member states of ASEAN without the need to apply for work permit within each country. Freedom of movement is very attractive to individual as well as employer.
Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking my panel colleagues here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to our wonderful panel, Freya, Helen, and to Jeannie. A wonderful conversation there on the importance of talent mobility. We've got one more session to go, which is looking at these global challenges of sustainable energy transition and artificial intelligence that are impacting the world and exploring how they are impacting Southeast Asia. If I can please invite back to the stage the Right Honourable the Lord Vaisey of Didcot, Chair of the UK-ASEAN Business Council. He'll be joined by Mak Jun Yen, the Chairman of the British-Malaysian Chamber of Commerce and CEO of Standard Chartered Bank Malaysia, Malika Ishwaran, Chief Economist at Shell, and Duncan Buchanan, Senior Director, International and UK Government Relations and Public Policy and Office of the Chair of Prudential plc and a UK-ABC Board Director. Ladies and gentlemen, please give them a very warm welcome.
Thanks very much, Alan. This is the last session of the day, and I think then we're going to have a wind-up from Stuart Tate and others. But it's great to talk about some of the big challenges. Obviously, when the Minister was here, he was talking about the sort of three priorities, if you like, of Malaysia's chairmanship, which included, obviously, green energy and renewable energy. It's obviously a hugely important topic, something that really dominates discussions whenever we're talking about ASEAN, because it's such a priority, and also because the UK has an element of expertise here, which is useful. But of course, we now live in an environment of drill, baby, drill. So it'll be interesting to understand from our participants how that has perhaps changed the context. But it was good to hear from the Minister that this is still a priority focus for ASEAN. And of course, you can't really have one person in a room without somebody discussing, even in their head, the role of artificial intelligence. We all have an opinion on that and how it's going to change it. And we do tend to focus to a certain extent on the downsides of artificial intelligence, and we also focus on the kind of competition between the great powers, if I can put it that way, to dominate artificial intelligence, and we perhaps lose sight of how artificial intelligence or machine learning is already here and already making a big difference to how companies operate more efficiently and more effectively. So hopefully that is the kind of thing we're going to focus on with our panelists. Alan has already very kindly introduced everyone, so I'm going to start straight away with Malika Ishwar. I'm the Chief Economist at Shell. Thank you so much for joining us. You cover both topics, obviously, because you can talk about the energy transition in ASEAN from Shell's perspective, but also, interestingly, about how Shell is using AI as well.
Yes, so obviously energy transition is my bread and butter for Shell and for me as the chief economist there. Yes, so I would just like to say that we've just launched our new scenarios. So Shell has a long tradition of doing scenarios as a way of thinking about the future and understanding some of the uncertainties that we see. We've just launched the 2025 scenarios, and it's not by chance that the name is energy security scenarios. So we think that along with this inevitable trend towards decarbonizing, there's also the energy security lens that's become co-dominant, if you like, in terms of how countries choose to navigate the energy transition. And I think ASEAN is sort of epitomizes this sort of trade-offs, if you like, between them. You have the high growth dynamic economies in ASEAN, where you're looking for energy to be able to fuel.
We need microphone security. I think it's fine. We can actually hear you, but I think it helps with the recording that the microphone is on. Carry on.
Yes, so I think the concern in this region is around how do you ensure there's enough energy to meet that growth demand, and how do you sort of support it? But at the same time, this is a region that's at the front line of climate impacts. So how do you at the same time decarbonize? And so I think the challenge in ASEAN is sort of what the world faces in terms of balancing economic growth and then decarbonizing. So our scenarios pick out three trends that are sort of crucial that we think in this, making this transition. One of them is called Surge, and that's all about AI and advanced digitalization. What does that do to energy demand? So we hear a lot about energy demand going up because of data centers, hyperscalers. But at the flip side, there's an opportunity for this technology to actually help you optimize demand better, and also to integrate the new low carbon technologies in. So pros and cons. Then we have another scenario called Archipelagos, which really picks up on what we see today around fragmentation and what we see with the US government policies coming out as very much individual, very much national interest dominated. And how does, there's a role for ASEAN to ensure that you don't move towards protectionism, keep markets open so that this new reset, this new green industrial revolution it remains open for countries in the ASEAN to then be supplying and producing and benefiting from, not just for decarbonization, but for industrial growth and production. And then the third scenario we have is sort of the wishful scenario, which is if you were to comply with the goals of the Paris Agreement, what would it take? What are the kinds of changes you'd need and the collaboration and alignment you need across countries so that you can make progress at pace. And again, here it's in the interest of ASEAN countries to ensure that collaboration and openness, whether it's on technologies, which are developing quickly, learnings from policies from across the world, or being this sort of attractive destination for financing. To either decarbonize or to set up low carbon industries. So I think, so the scenarios give you a set, if you like, of different outcomes that could happen based on today's trends. And I think in each of those, there's a very specific sort of implications, both risks, but also big opportunities for ASEAN countries to take a leadership role.
And I presume that Surge, Archipelagos, and Horizon, as those three scenarios are known, are available on the Shell website.
It is, yes, yes.
Brilliant.
And
so that's cancelled your dinner plans tonight.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that tour de force. Fascinating. And Mac, if I can turn to you as the boss of Standard Chartered in Malaysia. Obviously, we talk a lot about green finance. We talked about it just now about how you finance the green transition from Malika's point of view. Love to hear your perspective from Standard Chartered on what the current state of play is, how much of part of your business that is, but also in terms of artificial intelligence, how Standard Chartered is adopting that in Malaysia or in ASEAN.
Yeah, thank you, and very happy to be here. That's quite an echo, actually. I'm just trying to figure out the echo around this. We've completely embraced AI, but I think the point to recognize now is that in ASEAN especially, the income per capita for the average income per capita is about $6,000. So is the society necessarily ready for AI? What we do with AI is mostly for internal use cases. And a few key considerations from a bank's perspective for AI. One is transparency. Do your clients know that you're using AI? And if something goes wrong, accountability. What happens to accountability? Who's accountable? And how do you has the technology matured enough to be able to be certain that you've got total operational resilience around it? And what we've also found is that productivity is not necessarily increased if you're using AI in isolation. So it's all about the interface and interoperability of AI across different platforms. Today, it's not quite there. And last but not least, data. Data is a big issue. Consistency of data. It's rubbish in and rubbish out. In ASEAN, data collection, consistency of data is all over the place. So we've got to be very, very careful when we look at AI from that perspective. We have a concept of 100% human loop. So therefore, because AI self-learns, and if you do not provide human review of the AI mechanism, you will lose track and you end up with the a Terminator scenario, which is not something we all want.
Well, it was a great movie.
It was a great movie. I haven't watched Terminator Wonder. But finally, I guess how do we use AI? We use it for client onboarding. So for client due diligence, KYC, we're able to decipher and figure out the appetite of the client. We use it for risk. So whenever you do a transaction, for example, if you're doing a transaction between the UK and Malaysia, there are algorithms running in the background. Even if you transfer money within the UK, algorithms that run in the background to detect fraud, money laundering, patterns that we use. But again, not always accurate. And sometimes you do get calls, your cards get blocked when you travel. If you're buying something, my wife's credit card got blocked the other day because she was buying undergarments. And I got the call because she had a supplementary card. And she said, the call was, are you buying this particular set of undergarments? Of course, I had no idea what was being purchased. So, there are examples where AI goes wrong, right? And we use it for client engagement. So if you have your fixed deposit and it's coming due, we will know and you'll flag to the relationship manager or the banker, XYZ deposits are due, and you might want to give him or her a call, but also consider other cross-sells, upsells that you might want to consider based on the client's pattern. Talent acquisition is another one that we use AI for. So we use AI to find the right fit for people coming into the role. And yeah, so if you think of it from that perspective, last week we launched our own StanChart GPT. And the whole idea around this, I haven't tried it yet, but I was hoping to try it before coming here, but I couldn't quite get it to work. Maybe I shouldn't have said that.
The AI will cut.
There we go. It will. So I'll figure it out. But the whole idea is to help us do our own proposals, fact check. It's to and you know we're across the bank is across 53 different markets. So the wealth of knowledge that we kind of gather around our 53 markets is absolutely critical. And the whole idea, you know, in time we will be able to extract good, useful data across the organization. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for all those insights, Mac, about how Standard Chartered is using artificial intelligence, which is obviously very similar here, and we'll try and make it sort of regional specific as well. But Duncan, in terms of the Prudential, and I imagine obviously your use of artificial intelligence is very similar to how Mac was describing, but I'm also particularly interested in your kind of building kind of global expertise in the region. So you've got your AI hub based in Singapore. That's where you find the talent to drive it, driving this global business. Explain how the AI hub is kind of impacting on the business, and you know why it's so important to have it in the region.
Yeah, thanks. And I've learned a lot today. I mean, there are common threads that are coming through, and it sort of explains the AI lab approach that we've taken, which is reasonably recent. And I'll take some of Mac's use cases as an example. But the common thread, you know, is, and when you look at UK-ASEAN and the role today the Business Council has done to convene this, is there's a lot of commonality. There's a lot of surprisingly and pleasantly unviolent agreement on the opportunities. And I look at the language the ministers have used, what the UK and ASEAN are looking at collectively and independently. There's a huge commonality across standards, talent, and others. And this links to the AI lab, which is how does business, as it develops its use cases, which are similar to Mac's, quite specific to the company. It's not a panacea for everything. We're looking at how you apply the use cases, in our case, in life and health insurance and asset management, that's specific to the region, but that starts with quite often our operational disciplines and then applies it out to the customer base. And where I think, and that can be in, for example, using language models on health claims, medical, how the opportunity set there is not just how you deliver the internal operational efficiencies, quite frankly, which then hopefully gives you an opportunity to scale the business and reach more customers. It's how, and I think this is where this convening is so interesting, is how you then link that back to how the ASEAN agenda develops, or how the UK and ASEAN talk to each other about future needs planning for areas where we've talked a lot. You said, I think, you know, there's concerns about this. Well, how do you maximize the upside of the AI developments we've talked about for talent or mobility, recognize the diversity across within markets, and that includes in the UK. There's lots of questions. What do we do here? How does it benefit? How do the, you know, pro side of the column outweigh the cost side? And there's a huge amount of shared experience. I was thinking as I was listening to others talk this morning, back in the late 2000s, early 2010s, I was working on UK-India, and we were talking about manufacturing development and frugal innovation. And of course, we've seen the cost inputs for AI and the considerations of energy consumption. I was thinking, you know, for the UK-ASEAN dialogue, this fascinating, you know, experience exchange for what frugal innovation looks like, that drives inclusion, that addresses some of the potentially downside risks that AI could generate in job creation or wealth, a potential for inequality. How could you share that here to know that your products and services you're developing using AI have a job upside, deliver what they say in financial inclusion, in our example, and mitigate some of the risks that people are concerned about?
And I think, to this dialogue, that is almost the most interesting. We can exchange that, and the UK's partner status, I think, has been a really welcome advance on that.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And obviously, you're three global companies, but technically UK companies here. And it is fascinating to think, obviously, the UK prides itself on being seen as it were, in the Champions League places for AI. We're not going to win the Premier League. That'll be either the US or China, but we'll be in the top 4 because of the AI expertise that exists in the UK. And what is fascinating about what you said is this relationship between the expertise UK companies are building up in ASEAN and how that feeds back into the UK and then feeds back into ASEAN and so on. But Malika, can I come back to you and Shell? I mean, obviously, it would be interesting to know, one of the themes I sort of pick up, which I think really came out with the minister's talk earlier, is about the sort of different pace of change in ASEAN. So you've got this very interesting tension, which all trade blocs have, of wanting to have a unified superstructure of regulation and so on, but at the same time, every country having its own priorities and every country being at its own stage of development. I mean, are there, without necessarily wanting to, invidiously say, can you pick winners, but who are the sort of pioneering countries in terms of working with Shell on renewables and integrating AI technology as well?
So I think it's still early days in terms of how the use cases, if you like. I mean, a lot of the AI, advanced digitalization is still in the space of data centers, and that's sort of where the discussion is. We're still waiting to see the evolution into what are the use cases, where are the applications of this AI into sort of energy system, energy business. But we're seeing a lot of sort of the building blocks to be there in the sort of the ASEAN region, in the East Asian region. And that's driven basically by the fact that these are high growth economies and the energy demand is growing at the same pace. And in order to ensure energy security, this is a lever in which, by which to then deploy and ensure, firstly, that you have domestic energy, which tends to be renewables, that you're able to use that domestic energy most effectively. So you're applying technologies that are efficient and optimizing it. And thirdly, you're sort of creating an industrial base for the future in producing these technologies and not supplying just their own economy, but globally. So we're seeing a lot of that narrative around industrial policy now starting to come into this region. And so for us, we work closely with China, specifically, in terms of how China would transition its energy system. And of course, the interest there is very much on what are the technology policy learnings from the global sort of experience of this that they could then build on. But also, I think there's a lot of sort of spillover effects from what China is doing to the regional economy around ASEAN. Whether that's reducing costs of technology, whether that's providing sources of financing for those investments. So I think there's a lot going on there that we as Shell are very interested in, because going forward, somewhere like Europe or North America, energy demand is pretty much flat. So the growing areas are going to be in Latin America and Asia. So to that extent, we're keeping an eye on it. And I think energy transition is inevitable. So how does that play into the nature of energy demand that's growing in that region?
That's really interesting. So that's where all the pioneering is going to come from, in that region, because of the increase in energy demand and also the huge influence of China.
And industrial capability also. Yeah. It's that sort of virtuous cycle that we see building up. Yes.
Brilliant. Well, Mac, you're sitting at the heart of ASEAN. You're working in the country which is currently chair of ASEAN. You heard the minister say earlier that we want to get kind of regulatory alignment as much as possible in different areas. I raised with Duncan the point about this kind of tension with AI. I mean, you're looking at Standard Chartered, presumably, at huge opportunities with financial regulation alignment within ASEAN. It's going to make it much easier for you to do business. Is also the regulation of how you use AI also part of that discussion? How does all that work?
Yeah, absolutely. And the last thing we want in ASEAN is a bifurcation of AI ecosystems, right? So on that basis, and why not? Because you end up with fragmented AI rules that, and AI needs scale. AI needs scale to work well. Something that has been talked about extensively this morning was the ASEAN Digital Economic Framework. That is a classic example of how if we can kind of manifest that to an advanced stage by the end of this year, it would have been a great achievement. Not easy. And the minister talks about two key points from DIFA, which is cross-border trade and data sharing, if you will. And earlier, you've also heard that localization of data is not a good thing. So for AI to work, data needs to be accessible, it needs to be shared. And for some of you who may not be too familiar with DIFA, the way I think about it is you have the horizontal, which is all about streamlining a framework and standardization for all the participants or for the ASEAN countries that are signing up to DIFA. So you have a kind of a streamlined, standardized framework, if you will. Then the vertical. The vertical is all about interoperability. It's all about tapping to that value chain, allowing new entrants, new participants to come in to the vertical. So why that's important? 97% of companies in ASEAN are MSMEs, micro SMEs, if you will. Micro SMEs live on investments, FDIs, and they are part of that whole ecosystem. So for it to really work and for DIFA to be effective, it's all about the kind of the horizontal, but also the vertical aspect, policy alignment, privacy laws, everything has to work to enable AI to be effective in the ASEAN context.
Absolutely. Duncan, just to round off with you talking about this kind of, the Prudential in the UK is a deeply conventional brand. And it's very interesting for me, first of all, that you've got this AI center in Singapore, and this is kind of driving how the Pru as a whole is going to use AI. But there are different cultures. People in ASEAN interact with financial services companies in very different ways to, say, people in Europe. How is all the learning that is going on and the experimentation, if you like, that is based in Singapore, how is that kind of pervading through the organization? Because I'm fascinated by this feedback loop between the UK and ASEAN.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it follows on from what Matt was saying about interoperability. Harmonization doesn't preclude, and in fact, data doesn't allow for a complete, ignoring of local situations, primarily driven by customer preference. If we were to design and input data that was just Singapore-based into a Singapore, well, great, but it's not going to help our customers in Laos or Philippines or Hong Kong in the same way. And so there has that interoperability, and I think this is reflective of how standards develop, and talking about talent. This is the great thing we're seeing is more capacity building and dialogue that enables the exchange of information on interoperability and pushes towards enabling environments for this, not disincentivize. The same is true for sustainable finance as it is for AI, where you can develop a set of standards and it's very welcome in the UK or to a degree in Europe, and you can work on those. But if they're disincentivizing finance to flow where it's needed the most, that's not going to be helpful to the overall outcome. The other piece of the culture piece that you're talking about is that feedback loop with customers. Quite frankly, with our customer base, be interested in others' experience, customers have to believe that the products and services that financial services or any other company using, developing, deploying AI is trustworthy, and that means being competent. It means being culturally specific. I heard the digital minister for Malaysia last summer, I think, in London, talking about, as they were thinking about the National AI Office that they've set up, thinking about as much what you might term the soft elements of the software, which is about culture and standards. And Helen and others were talking about this. We've got a lot of experience in the UK. I worked on the thing, slightly odd naming, very British Banking Standards Board before Prudential. And that was thinking about how do you bring the ethics and cultural standards piece to professional skills and services. And that has to reflect, you can't universalize that. I know, as best you might want to for operational efficiency, but it won't work for your customer base. And the trust levels or the trustworthiness levels for AI in ASEAN, as I've seen them, and I know there are different measures for it, it's not there yet. And that's not unusual that's on a jobs perspective. But if you're going to make these applications work, ultimately customers are going to have to trust that they're using something that is beneficial to them. They can see them, to Mac's point of the sort of human in the loop. That has to include cultural reference points. It can't be exclusionary.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much indeed to our excellent panel. Mac from Standard Chartered, thank you for coming to us. Duncan from Prudential and Malika from Shell. And that concludes the session.
Thank you very much, Lord Vasey, Mac, to Malika and to Duncan for that excellent conversation. We've got a couple more things before we head to our networking lunch. It is a real pleasure to invite my very good friend Hong Joo-Kee, the Executive Director of the ASEAN Business Advisory Council of Malaysia, to share with us one of their key priorities for the year, the ASEAN Inclusivity Collective. Joo-Kee.
Thanks, Alan. Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. As Alan has introduced, we've been good friends for a long time, and thanks for giving me this opportunity. I'm honored to share with you the ASEAN Inclusivity Collective, AIC, one of the 12 policy initiatives that ASEAN Bank Malaysia has rolled out in support of Malaysia's ASEAN Chairmanship theme of inclusivity and sustainability. Now, the motivation behind this initiative is mainly for two reasons. Number one is that inclusivity is ASEAN's shared aspiration. Now, as you know, ASEAN is a region renowned with dynamic demographics and rich cultural diversity. Our commitment to honoring the distinctiveness of each ASEAN member state is the bedrock of ASEAN's peace and stability. Now, under the social-cultural pillar, ASEAN has envisioned to be an inclusive community that promotes a high quality of life, equitable access to opportunities for all. ASEAN promotes and protects human rights of women, children, youth, elderly persons, persons with disabilities, migrant workers, vulnerable and marginalized groups. ASEAN has a declaration on the elimination of violence against women and works towards achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls. It commits to reducing barriers by providing guidelines for quality care and support and ensuring inclusive, participatory, and representative decision-making at all levels, and many more initiatives. Now, the second reason is that the inclusivity agenda has an increasing relevance to businesses. Now, the integration of inclusive business practices into business operations is an essential component of the ESG reporting. Not only that, investors see inclusive companies as great investment opportunities as they are resilient and forward-thinking, helping investors reach diverse markets, attract top talent, drive innovation, and boost revenue. So recognizing the significant value of inclusivity practices for businesses and in response to ASEAN's overarching aspirations, the ASEAN Inclusivity Collective was established with a long-term goal of encouraging businesses across ASEAN to commit to a set of actions that is to embrace 6 key inclusivity practices by 2030. And they are, number 1, board and management representation, particularly but not limited to women. Number 2, workplace demographics transparency. Number 3, pay equity, support for caregivers. Number 4. Number 5, anti-discrimination and equal opportunity. And number 6, zero tolerance for violence and harassment. Now, it is important to note that we observe a few principles that we uphold. Number one is participation in the ASEAN Inclusivity Collective is entirely voluntary and commits to meritocracy. The pledge is culturally sensitive and fully respectful of the laws of the land. Members of the collective can adjust the AIC goals according to your unique business needs, as well as stakeholder demands and local circumstances. We envision bringing thousands of companies and organizations. My chairman has given me a target of 4,000, which we am sure that we can achieve with your help, especially from the UKABC. We envision to bring companies across the region to join the AIC from now until 2030 through a journey of pledge, guide, and track. And as you can see, we're just getting started. Now, to this end, I would like to invite all public and private sector companies, whether you're a multinational corporation, SME, industry association, or any other institution based in ASEAN, to come join our growing community and make ASEAN a hub for inclusive growth. Now, I'd like to, of course, take this opportunity to thank UKABC and BMCC, along with other business councils who have signed up to be our supporting partners, now, as well as HSBC Malaysia and also Standard Chartered Malaysia for being a pioneer member of the AIC. I think, can I just say that I can get maybe 1,000 companies from the UK based in ASEAN to support us, Lord Vasey? Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And with that, I'd like to invite you to perhaps just scan the QR code to get in touch with me, and I'm sure that my good friend Alan will be able to help as well. And I'd like to conclude by saying that by encouraging you to be part of shaping ASEAN's inclusive tomorrow by joining the ASEAN Inclusive Collective today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Juki, and thank you everyone for signing up, and Lord Vasey for agreeing to that target of 1,000 companies. We do get referral points, don't we, Juki, for all the UK firms that do sign up. To help wrap up this morning, we've got a closing keynote remarks by Catherine West MP, the Minister at the FCDO. And to introduce the Minister, would you please give a warm welcome to Charles Hay, the Director, FCDO, and former High Commissioner to Malaysia and Ambassador to South Korea. Charles. Very warm welcome.
Thanks very much, Alan. It's a great pleasure to be here. Those sinister words wrapping up the indicator that I'm one of the few things standing between you and lunch, so I'll be brief, not least because my minister is about to join us virtually. She's sorry she can't be here physically, but she's actually in Malaysia at the moment, which seems somewhat appropriate. Can I thank Lord Vasey and the team at the UKABC for this fantastic event, which I found extremely rich, actually, and very timely. And I think the testament to that is how many people have stayed all the way through, paying close attention to what's being said. And thank you also to the sponsors, HSBC, ACCA, Mott MacDonald, and others. This is a fantastic opportunity to bring together business, to show us the opportunities, to talk about the opportunities in this very high growth sector. And I don't need any convincing about that personally, having been 4.5 years in Malaysia as High Commissioner and now covering the region, Southeast Asia and the Pacific, in the Foreign Office. And I think you'll have seen over the past months the evidence of the government's commitment to deepening UK-ASEAN ties. I think it was widely noted that one of the first trips, I think the first trip that the Foreign Secretary took was to Vientiane, to the ASEAN meeting there. Last weekend, I was with the Foreign Secretary in the Philippines. Catherine West, Minister West, is, as I say, at the moment in Malaysia, going on to Brunei. And this week, we also have the Indo-Pacific Roadshow in town. So I think the evidence of the commitment is there very much in front of you. And under the chairmanship of Malaysia this year, and it's fantastic to see Tengku Zafrul here twice in as many months, literally, in London, and a very successful visit of Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim in January. We're looking forward to supporting Malaysian chairmanship in their themes of sustainability and inclusivity over the year ahead. So with that, I want to say thank you very much, and I'll hand over now. Hopefully, somebody's got their finger on the button To start, Minister Catherine West. Thank you very much.
I'm thrilled to be speaking to you at this crucial forum, and I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, but I'm currently in Malaysia, seeing firsthand the value of our ASEAN-UK partnership and underlining UK support for Malaysia's 2025 ASEAN Chairmanship. Since becoming the Minister for the Indo-Pacific, I visited over half the countries in Southeast Asia and met a wide range of leaders across government, business and civil society. And each time, I've come away even more enthused about the value and importance of our growing partnership. Today's theme of growing together encapsulates our partnership perfectly. From digital and financial services to education and infrastructure, we're bringing together the strength of our institutions, businesses and communities to support our mutual interest in secure and resilient growth. We're among ASEAN's top 6 largest investors, and our trading relationship is worth almost £50 billion per year. This includes a £500 million Thai investment in Scotland's largest offshore power plant, and Malaysia's £4 billion redevelopment of Brabazon New Town. These are not just figures on spreadsheets, but tangible, life-changing initiatives creating 6,500 homes and 36,000 new jobs. But this cannot be the ceiling of our ambition, and we must keep going further. That's why, through our dialogue partnership, we're supporting your economic priorities in trade, health, education, and clean energy transition. We've gathered together at a critical time in an increasingly volatile world, with growing threats from emerging technologies and a warming planet. That's why we must work together to keep the Indo-Pacific free and open, with a stable, prosperous ASEAN at its heart. I remain committed to working with you and our Malaysian friends as this year's ASEAN Chair to seize the opportunities ahead. Thank you to UKABC for bringing us together, and I look forward to hearing about your discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles and Minister West, for those kind remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to a close. And to help wrap up, the gentleman who kicked us off in the morning, would you please give a warm welcome back for his conclusions and reflections, Stuart Tate, Head of Commercial Banking UK, HSBC, and Vice Chair, UK-ASEAN.
Thanks, Alan. This is the final wrap-up, Charles. But it's been a pleasure to host you all. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you found it productive. I hope you found it very interesting. Of course, I set out to be able to summarize this, but after 15 minutes, with all the content that was coming out, I gave up. But I would say that this is a business forum. And I think what was made clear today is there is good business to be done between the UK and ASEAN, but it's up to us to really go after it. Now, the Lord Mayor said one way to go after it is to get on a plane and knock on doors, and that's what many people are doing here today. That's what we need to do going forward. Another way to do it is to partner and collaborate, and that's what came through very loud and very clearly today. If we do that, then we'll all grow, and we'll create jobs, and we'll create prosperity. So I don't want to keep you from your lunch, because it is that rare occasion where you get a free lunch from your friendly banker. But I do want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to the Honourable Tengku Zafrul, and I want to say thank you also to Tan Sri Nazir Razak. Thank you for being available and for staying with us through the day. You're very accessible, and I think we all appreciated the very pragmatic comments, the very honest comments that you made when you were on the panel, when you spoke earlier. So thank you very much for that. Thank you to the Lord Mayor, to ambassadors, to various high commissioners, trade commissioners, lords or Lord Vasey, thank you very much. Obviously to all guests, thumbs up, to all guests and all speakers for making their time and sharing their views so openly and honestly. Also to Ian Gibbons and the very wonderful, marvelous team at UK-ASEAN, to everybody in the room, and also to the many more people who have joined us today online. Thank you to them. Have a terrific day. I wish you much prosperity, good business, and see you all at the same time next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stuart. And ladies and gentlemen, that is indeed a wrap. And for those of you online, thank you very much for joining us as well. But we now have a wonderful lunch. Thank you very much to HSBC for kindly providing it. And as Stuart mentioned, see you again next year. We do have a small token of appreciation for Lord Vasey. If we can invite Tan Sri Nazir. Sorry, we're not quite wrapping up yet. This is the pre-wrap wrap.
I don't deserve it. Thank you so much. And it's been a wonderful day. One thing I forgot to mention is that our wonderful Chief Executive, Ian Gibbons, got a gong, what we call a gong, in the UK, an honour and the New Year's honours list. He got an OBE, and Ian has very kindly said that it's really mine. It's been a team effort. It's a great recognition of Ian's hugely distinguished career in the diplomatic service, and the fact that he can give back by being in the UK-ASEAN Business Forum.
And with that, that's a wrap. See you outside for lunch. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy the rest of your day.